Good evening, everyone. We just took the feed live. We've got board members present, either present on WebEx or present in the room. And we'd like to welcome you all to the regular meeting of the Mahomet-Seymour Board of Education. I'd like to call that meeting to order. It is 7 p.m. on Monday, November 16th. At this time, I'd like to remind anyone attending in person to please sign in, silence their cell phones. Remind our visitors that in order to facilitate an effective meeting, anyone who wishes to make comments, please read the visitor guidelines found on the table right outside the door, complete the attached public participation form, and get those to Dawn. Dawn, could we have a roll call, please?
Giles.
Here.
Keith.
Here.
Hendricks.
Here.
Schultz.
Here.
Larson. Here. Hennessy.
Here.
McComb.
Here. Let's stand, if we would, for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Board members, you've had a chance to look at the agenda for tonight. There's been a suggestion that we move under new business, that we move items 1 and 2 to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to do that?
I'll make that motion, Ken.
Okay, we got a motion, all right. So can we make that to approve the agenda with the addition of 1 and 2 being on the consent agenda? Is that fine? So we do this with one motion maybe?
Sure.
Okay, is there a second for that?
Second.
Discussion? Anyone uncomfortable with that plan? Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Larson.
Yes.
Hendricks.
Yes.
Giles.
Yes.
Hennessy.
Yes.
Keith.
Yes.
Schultz.
Yes.
McComb.
Yes, and we've approved the agenda with that change. So, next up would be the consent agenda. So tonight, the consent agenda includes minutes of previous meetings, bills, treasurer's report, some personnel changes, a press update, and now it includes adoption of the estimated 2020 tax levy and adoption of the renewals for health, dental, and vision for our group insurance plans. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a discussion on the consent agenda? Roll call vote, please.
Hennessy.
No.
Schultz.
No.
Keith.
Yes.
Giles.
Yes.
Hendricks.
Yes.
Larson.
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. Okay. Next up is donations. Dr. Hall.
There are no donations for November.
All right. So we can skip right by that. Next is special recognition tonight. Dr. Hall.
Yes, it is my honor to welcome Ellen Erickson to our meeting this evening. Is Ellen on? Okay. She was going to log in, so.
She's wrong.
Okay, she's trying.
Oh, I saw her.
Could we move on to the next special recognition?
Sure. Move on to that one.
Okay.
Oh.
All right.
Ellen, are you there? Ellen, you need to unmute yourself, please.
There she is.
Okay, I'm here now. Hold on, let me start my video. I was having some issues getting on. There I am.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you for joining us. Good evening.
Hi.
We are proud to honor you tonight, Ellen, and congratulate you on your award and recognize you as the recipient of the Paul T. Griffith Teacher of the Year Award, given annually by the Illinois Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. So congratulations. You were honored with this award at the annual conference of the ICTFL in October. So I just want to give a little bit of background information and some more kudos to you for your outstanding teaching and leadership in our school district. Mrs. Erickson's been a Spanish instructor in the Mahomet-Seymour schools for both our junior high and high school students for 14 years. She's been instrumental in establishing the seal of biliteracy for our students, as well as being a statewide leader in a professional organization and an outstanding leader here in our school district in so many ways. I want to read a little bit from the nomination letter that Mr. Chad Benedict wrote, our high school principal, about Mrs. Erickson. She has many fine qualities that make her an outstanding candidate for Teacher of the Year Award. During her time at Mahomet-Seymour High School, Mrs. Erickson has exhibited many fine qualities. Relationship building is one of these qualities. She goes above and beyond to build relationships inside and outside of the classroom. In the classroom, her students have a voice. Mrs. Erickson was our first teacher to turn to alternative seating in her classroom and removed all of the desks. Her students loved the idea and showed improved growth in her classes. Outside of the classroom, Mrs. Erickson plays a key role in our drama department. Countless hours are spent with students. She's devoted to helping them achieve their goals in drama. She goes above and beyond in her job description and will often take on extra tasks to assist others. She's currently mentoring a first-year teacher. During a normal year, we would have a program in place to assist with this. As we all know, this is no normal year, and she's doing a fantastic job in assisting our new staff member. Mrs. Erickson has taken the lead on technology in our building. As we navigate the waters of remote learning, she's willing to try new things, problem solve, and share her experiences with others. She cares deeply about the education of all of our students in all subject areas, and that's never been more evident than the start of the 2021 school year. Her classroom experiences are beneficial to so many of our staff. Her professionalism is second to none, as Mrs. Erickson is a trusted staff member that can be counted upon to serve our teachers and students with integrity each day. I value her opinion on many things, and I know I can rely on her to provide fair and honest feedback. She plays a big role in striving to achieve our goals as a school community. And these next comments come from Jenna Keller, who's a colleague in the World Languages Department. Ellen has become a very essential part of our department school with her leadership and creativity in classroom. She's an amazing colleague. She shares not only her fun way of creating things to motivate us to teach, but her direction and innovation on what is new and challenging in the field is amazing. And that's from Jenna Keller. It's truly an honor, Ellen, to have a statewide Teacher of the Year on our staff. In addition to the learning experiences that you afford to your students, you are an outstanding team member, peer, and colleague. So congratulations, Senora Erickson.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a real humbling honor, especially in the year 2020, to represent not only our district, but also the world language teachers of the state of Illinois. So I hope I can continue to represent them at the Central States Council of Teachers of Foreign Languages when that'll be in March. So there'll be another sort of interview process and a second part to this Teacher of the Year process.
Well, that's just excellent. Ellen, let me echo Dr. Hall congratulating you on this. If you were here, we'd run you around the building or the room and shake your hand, but, well, we wouldn't.
Give me your high.
But we're gonna give you air high fives, and it's just so indicative of your work and much of our staff that just excels every day. And we appreciate that so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us tonight.
And you're welcome to spend the rest of the night on WebEx with us if you'd like. Or you can sign off.
No, I actually was planning on staying. So yes, but muting myself for sure. And probably off my video as well.
All right. Dr. Hall?
All right, moving on to our next special recognition is recognizing our school board members. Annually, November 15th is School Board Member Day in Illinois. This day is set aside to acknowledge the volunteer spirit, dedication, and commitment of one's own time and service to the public school district where all of you are elected, Mahomet-Seymour. Today is an opportunity to publicly thank you and recognize you for your service. There has likely not been a more difficult time to provide service to a school district, and none of you ran on a platform to make decisions during a worldwide pandemic. I thank you for your time. My personal thanks to each of you. You're giving so much of your energy and passion in serving our students, staff, and our families and community. Your efforts are appreciated, and we just want to say thank you and just appreciate all that you do. And I know that it is not an easy role to be in right now, so thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hall.
Thank you. We appreciate the festive balloons tonight and the delicious cookies. Normally, I would appreciate the delicious cookies to a greater extent, but since I'm trying to watch that kind of thing right now, but that's more cookies to share with the rest of the board, I guess, right? So, very good, and thank you, and we appreciate you taking a minute to do that. It is now time for communication. Is there anyone from the PTO? MSEA, I believe, is here. Are you gonna make a statement? Yep.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Jones, co-president of the MSEA, along with James Heinold here. Last week, as reported in the News Gazette, the Champaign County Public Health Department recommended any schools conducting any form of in-person learning pivot to all remote mode as soon as possible, given rising coronavirus numbers and community spread. As leaders of some area districts have taken pains to point out, this is not a mandate from public health. The decision remains in the hands of local school district leaders. The fact is, however, that our public health experts have recommended that schools and the communities they serve will be best prepared for the coming increased virus risk by going fully remote. In a recent message to staff, Dr. Hall said it was too early to decide what we should do beyond Thanksgiving. Specifically, she said, today is not the day to make that determination. This is an evolving situation and much could change between now and next week or the following week. This is how 2020 has been all along. As we have done since the beginning of the school year, we will continue to monitor our cases and exposures, respond accordingly, and move ahead. Our first question about this response is, where was this caution when you were asked about going back full in-person in January? If in the face of the county health district recommending full remote schooling, you feel you still don't know enough to decide what to do next week, how could you possibly have made an informed decision about next semester? As Dr. Hall has indicated, her decision-making process in this context is reactive. As I quoted earlier, she wrote, "We will continue to monitor our cases and exposures and respond accordingly." In other words, we will wait to see if a lot more of our students and staff get sick and then respond. Unsurprisingly, MSEA does not find this as an acceptable way to approach a pandemic, especially since neither the board nor even district management faced the exposure risk your teachers and support staff faced. The County Health Board's recommendation is a proactive response. It recognizes that if you wait for community spread to clearly be happening before you act, you've waited too long. Pointing to our past low numbers is irrelevant in this context. The state of Illinois in the last 2 weeks has posted day after day a record number of new cases. What was predicted by public health experts has come to pass. As cold weather is keeping folks inside more, the virus spread is accelerating. Our district itself has seen a 57% increase in cases in the last 10 days. Limiting exposure now before it becomes a problem in Mahomet-Seymour should be our goal. As adults, charged with the education of this community's children, we teach and expect our students to respect experts, starting with us. It's a strange and contrary example we set for our kids when in the midst of a crisis, we disregard the very people with the expertise to get us through it. MSEA's position is that we should go full remote as soon as possible as the County Health Board recommends. We are happy to work with the district to make that transition as smooth as possible. If the district chooses to ignore the recommendations of the County Health Board, MSEA will consider the employer to be asking employees to work in hazardous working conditions and intends to file a grievance accordingly. The MSEA is strong and united on the issue of school safety. Over 92% of Mahomet-Seymour teachers are members, and their voices need to be not only heard, but strongly considered. Thank you.
Mandy, can you repeat that last part? You said 92% of what? I'm sorry.
Mahomet-Seymour teachers are members.
Okay, next is foundation. Lori, anything from the foundation?
Yes, I spoke with Tammy Marsh just earlier today that the annual campaign letter is in the mail, just went out, she said today, and that will serve as their fundraiser also for the year. And if I can remind everybody, the Education Foundation is the foundation that usually has the Bulldog Dash, and all of that money goes back into our schools and our teachers in our community, specifically our schools, through grants that are awarded normally during the typical year. We usually are actually meeting right now and awarding them at the end of December. So please pay attention to that and know that those donations are 100% tax deductible and they go right back to our kids in our classrooms.
Outstanding. Visitors, do we have any in-person visitors that asked to speak?
No.
We have 2 visitors that have arranged previously to tonight to speak via WebEx. The first is Lindsay Kearns. Lindsay, are you out there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I can't
Lindsay,
see
you
myself,
got
but
5 minutes if you need that. If you go longer than 4, we will give you a 1-minute warning.
okay. So my name's Lindsay Kearns. I am a parent of 3 children in the district, one at the high school level, one at the junior high, and one in elementary school. I'm also an attorney licensed to practice in both the state of Illinois and the state of Colorado, but most relevantly, I practice in Illinois now. My children have been remote learning since the fall, primarily because 2 of the 3 have significant lung conditions. But that aside, I just have some real concerns about the district not heeding the warnings of and recommendations of both ISBE and the Champaign-Urbana Public Health District. I don't know the specifics, legally speaking, of what the district's insurance looks like, but I will say that the general liability insurance that most districts have does not, it excludes communicable diseases, which include COVID. Um, and I will say that just from 15 years of experience of practicing law, unfortunately, in the face of death, be it from a child, especially, or a staff member, or an affected family member that has come home and been infected, the best way that I've seen people seek to soothe pain is through financial recourse and litigation. And I think it's especially important for the district to consider that the standard of care basically is that you're reasonably expected to take steps to ensure the health and safety of students and others that enter the school grounds are protected. And I think, further failure to ensure adherence to proper health protocols makes the district financially at risk. I hate to boil lives or COVID down to finances, but let's be realistic. That's what happens. And, as a taxpayer, I'm concerned about what legal advice the district has gotten and what legal ramifications the taxpayers may be on the hook for. But more than that, again, we've made the decision as a family to keep our kids home. But I've been in contact and communication with members of the community, educators that I have the utmost respect for. I mean, the reason that we have decided not once but twice to reside in Mahomet is because of the educational system here. But I fear that educators don't feel like they're being looked out for right now. And I think we owe it to all of them to keep them safe, and I guess like I don't quite understand why we are making our own rules and flying in the face of advice of scientific professionals and advice. um, I think we owe it to the community to keep us all safe, and the same people that say we need to keep the schools open are the people that say that we need to keep our businesses afloat. And honestly, I think that um, keeping kids home for this window of time, which is so small, you're looking at the advices to keep the kids home through the Christmas break. Well, honestly, I have been involved with my kids in their school activities from November and December, and if we're all being honest, it's more fun than learning, and so it's such a small sacrifice to make. But I would really encourage both
Lindsay, you're at
from,
1 minute.
yep, both from a financial standpoint, a human standpoint, and just a health and safety standpoint, to heed the advice of the local public health officials and protect our teachers, protect our staff, protect our students. And um, it's such a small sacrifice in the grand scope of things.
Okay. Thank you,
Thank you,
Lindsay.
Lindsay.
Also, Eric Potter asked to speak on WebEx. Eric, are you out there?
I don't see him here.
We don't see Eric, okay.
That doesn't mean he's not here, but I don't see him listed.
Well, I know Eric thought he might have a hard time getting back from wherever he was in time to join us on WebEx, and I know he did send a written statement in. So we do have that. Okay. I'd like to thank everyone for their comments tonight. Next, we're into board communication. So let's start with Mr. Keith.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Ken. Yes, we can, Ken.
Okay. As everyone is well aware, last Thursday, the Champaign-Urbana Public Health District, our county's public health authority, issued new guidance for private and public schools throughout Champaign County. The recommendation essentially stated that because community transmission of the coronavirus has reached such a widespread level, that schools in Champaign County should switch educational models to a fully remote model as soon as possible. As we have discussed many times in these meetings, this is an eventuality that has been widely predicted since March of this year. On multiple occasions, we've asked Dr. Hall, and she's confirmed that the district has plans in place and is ready for this transition. It has long been the expectation that we will see a surge in new COVID cases in late fall that will necessitate drastic changes in our daily lives to protect ourselves, our neighbors, our first responders, and our medical workers. That day is here. We have heard and we will hear arguments for and against switching to a remote model that focus on the welfare of our children. Some argue that COVID is dangerous for children and has potentially unknown long-lasting effects. Some argue that the damage to the academic preparation of students is greater than the statistical risk to life. Some argue that the mental health impacts for our students outweigh any other medical risks from the virus. Others, understandably, argue with concern for the adults who serve our students. They worry that the retired elderly bus driver, the teacher with diabetes, the lunch staff member with a heart condition, or the secretary with a medically fragile child at home will be the ones who pay dearly for our in-person education. Tonight, I want to add one more argument to the list. During the First World War, citizens worked together to conserve much-needed food for our troops by instituting wheatless Wednesdays and meatless Mondays. During World War II, gender norms were temporarily set aside, and women left the home to do their part for the war effort in factories across America. In times of serious crisis, Americans have stepped up to do their part for their nation and for their neighbors. We must recognize what our part is now during this crisis. We must act not in fear or defiance, but in duty to our fellow citizens. We must act for the care of the older generations who made greater sacrifices for our benefit when history called upon them. It is our duty to sacrifice the convenience of traditional in-person education for the welfare of our nation and our neighbors. Now, the reality is that all these arguments are correct to some degree. We, the board, must consider them, prioritize, and lead the community. I believe that the most prudent, responsible choice for this board is to hear the pleading of our public health experts and switch to remote learning as soon as possible. Our administrative team has planned meticulously, and they have prepared the staff that they lead. Let's make the right choice and let our staff get to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Colleen?
Good evening. You know, these days it seems like we have a lot of things that people disagree about and a lot of things that are very stressful for people to think and consider. And those are all really important jobs for us. And I think doing the work of the board is what we're here for, and we need to work on it. Before we start, I just wanted to give a shout out to something else happening in our district that's not contentious and not sad. It's really happy. And that's a shout out for our junior high cross country team. And we have been reached out to from that coaching staff with some of the information about that team. And I just think it's really, in these days, we should celebrate the things that are successful and great. And this year, they were the 2020 sectional champions. Both the boys and the girls team won that. And they really, according to everything we've heard, they have had a really great experience there. And we've had a lot of coaches, Lori Clark and Conan Jerkowski and Matt Mills and Andrew Walmer and Lisa Martin, who have worked with the team and given them a great experience. And so I just want to say congratulations to them and just give them a little shout out. So thanks.
Thank you, Colleen. Megan?
I don't have too many comments tonight, but I, like Colleen, was also thinking of what are the small wins that we can celebrate. And I just wanted to say, first and foremost, thank you to everyone who has taken the time to come and talk to the board, to share their thoughts via email with the board, to reach out and make phone calls and talk to us personally. I do think it's important that we do understand how everyone's feeling so that we can best represent those thoughts and feelings. So I know that that is time consuming for people to do, especially with everything else that you have going on. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for all the time you're spending to keep us informed and aware of what you're feeling as a community. And then if anyone is looking for anything safe to do, another great thing is that the Mahomet-Seymour High School's drama department is getting ready to release Cauldron and Bubble. They've been extraordinarily inventive this year by you can't have a play and you can't have a theater full of audience. And so they got inventive and they have filmed their play this year. And so you can go and buy tickets to that and you will have access to sit with your family the 20th, starting the 20th for about a week. So I encourage people to look into supporting the drama department by buying access to that, seeing some fun faces. And I think there was a lot of time and effort put into that. So I just want to put a shout out to everyone who in these times is still finding a way to spread some joy, have kids have access to some of the things that are important to them, even in these trying times. It's a little bit selfish. My son is in the play, but I was able to watch him practice and perform and film all with masks, all very conscientious of distancing. And I just thought they did a really great job. So if we can in turn as a community support that by sitting down with the family and watching that play, I think it'll be entertaining and I think it'll be well worth your time.
Very good. Thank you, Megan. Let's go to Merle.
I just want to just really say thank you. The health department has one job and they do it rather well, and to get the word out on what they're supposed to do. I believe that what we're faced with as board members are things that often have multiple prongs, and that our duties are indeed broad, including the social and emotional health of students. So I would just like to say that I think we also do a pretty good job dealing with the broad duties that we have. We are not a single issue board, never have been. We have multiple constituencies, and I just think that's what we do best when we do make those kinds of considerations.
Thank you, Merle. Lori?
I'd like to echo some of the things that were already said. I usually try to highlight the positive myself too. Great job with junior high cross country. I actually had a great niece who ran and asked me to come and watch her at her first meet this year in another town, and so I followed cross country, so way to go. But I'd also like to highlight the high school girls got 14th at state, the boys got 2nd at state. We just have a legacy of runners in our community, so I thank Neil Garrison and Jean McGurdelushin for that. I was excited to see that we were able to pull off academic letters for our students to excel in the classroom and, you know, still get some fall sports in with tennis and golf. I'd like to close on my comments on, I just attended the Illinois School Board Association Delegate Assembly this last weekend. It was remote, but I want to close with something that kind of goes along the lines of what Merle said. Everybody that's on the board and in the community had access to see the resolutions that were proposed. But out of 258 members in the assembly there to vote on number 7, which was the local control pandemic, 89% of the people that were voting voted that the school boards historically maintain the local control within their community with the school board. And again, that goes along the lines with what Merle said. Some people just have to worry about one thing, and we have a large thing to worry about. And I just want people in the community to know that it's not just us that have one way. There's 230 other districts, 89% of the ones that were represented, that really want that control to stay within the district. So I was very glad to get the opportunity to go to this, so thank you for letting me attend that conference.
Jeremy?
I don't have anything to add.
I'll just add a couple things real quickly. Appreciate the shout out for school board appreciation. Yesterday, the official day actually was Sunday. I think we all celebrated today because schools weren't in session on Sunday. The Chicago Tribune celebrated by publishing an article on Sunday about the trials and tribulations that school boards have been through in Illinois. If you've not read that, it's an interesting article. One of the side benefits that's come out of this is a chance I've had to talk to a lot of other board leaders in other parts of the state. And the Tribune article featured the Wheaton president, Brad Paulson. And I've had the opportunity to get to visit with Brad a little bit and hear his story and some of the things going on there, as I've had the opportunity to talk to some other local board presidents and board presidents in districts kind of like our size and our situation. So that's kind of one of the positives that have come out of this is some networking chances, opportunities, I guess, and the ability to build some relationships. The other thing I'll hit on real quick, we talked about doing things differently and trying to make the best of the situation we're in. Every year, our schools do really a fantastic job of Veterans Day. And if you've not been to any of our Veterans Day presentations over the years, you have really missed something. And of course, this year, bringing the veterans into our buildings and honoring them in person was not a good idea. And therefore, we didn't do that. But the district did produce a very nice video production, and that was released on Veterans Day. And I appreciate all those folks in our buildings that were involved in that, involved in a coordinated effort, I think, between just about every building. and putting that together. And Bulldog TV produced that, I think. Is that what I heard?
Actually, our music department was responsible
Our music
for that,
department
and then
produced it, okay.
got uploaded to Bulldog
Yeah.
TV.
Uploaded to Bulldog TV. Okay, very good. Well, that was great, and not what we would normally do, but nonetheless, a great job, and we sure appreciate it. Okay. Next, financial update. Heather.
It's just gonna be a little bit of a repeat of what I talked about in the finance committee meeting of just, we are starting to get more money in from our county treasurer. You'll notice from the red flag report, we got a total of 7.9 million in October, so that was a big chunk of it. And then we got another million in just in November now. So we are at 90, I believe it was 97%. So we still have a little bit more to get, but we've gotten a large chunk of it so far, and that is for last year's levy. The other thing is that we have started the percentage in sales tax. And I'm looking at what we received in October versus October of both years. It was down 1.9%, which kind of lowers our average for the calendar year to 6.2%. So that's good. We're still on the lower end. We had said worst case scenario was 20%. So we are getting that in too, and you'll see our days cash was up a little bit, and that is because we are started seeing the money come in from our CARES grant, ESSER grant, and then also the technology grant that Nicole and Jared received. So we've been able to claim some of that money, and it started coming in as well. So everything is on target as of right now.
I'm guessing the fact that the county sent more money didn't hurt our days of cash either.
No, it did not. But compared to last year, we had more money from them last year at this time as well. But some of it's just the fact that we've been able to offset some of the expenses we already had planned with the CARES grant. So that did help a little bit. So I'm just happy we're on track for now. Just keep hoping for the best going forward.
Heather, does the county realize that we don't have all of our money yet, you think?
Yes, I do, because I look back to see.
Because I worry about that. Just
yeah, yes, and I will stay on top of them, but I look back to see, and usually it is done. Right now we were on our 5th distribution, and usually there's about 8 distributions. Okay. So, but of course, if I don't see it coming through, I will give them a call. And the assistant treasurer, I met him personally. I went there. And he seems to be really good and on top of things, so his name was Daniel, so I just keep talking to him and make sure that we get the rest of our money. And as I talked about before, get on track, be able to talk to the new person coming in to see what their intentions are going forward so that we know how to budget. And we know what to expect, especially towards the end of this year when we expect to start getting our 2020 money.
Very good. Thank you for staying on top of that.
Thank you.
Any questions for Heather? Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Northrop, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. So this month, the board report is a quite condensed version based on what you got last month. Not much in there that really needs explanation, but I do want to publicly thank 3 folks. Those are our district trainers for our crisis prevention and intervention training. It's de-escalation training for students who may be having difficulty of some sort at school, and ways to help set that up to prevent it, and what to do if it should happen. So Lauren Pratt, our district behavioral interventionist, Cynthia Johnson, the Lincoln Trail social worker, and Brian Bajer, a special education teacher at the high school, are our 3 trainers. They spend a significant amount of time having to be trained themselves so they can come back and train all of the necessary people in our district, and that includes teachers, paraprofessionals, other support staff, administrators. They did it this year in a much shortened timeline. They did it with COVID in a really socially distant and safe way. in a bit of a blended model. So they really had to switch up and change what they were doing, and then staff had to be really flexible to be able to partake in that training. So a special thank you to them and a thanks to all the staff who were willing to participate so we could get that done by the December timeline. Questions for me?
I am hearing none. Thank you for your report
Thanks,
tonight.
Christine.
Have a good night.
Thanks. Dr. Romo.
So I don't have anything new, but I do want to point out the SAT scores for this year. I think when the students took those in the fall, with school being remote somewhat this past spring, we anticipated those scores to be a little bit lower, but they were in fact a little bit higher. So be interested to see how that trend continues over the next few years as we are trying to play catch up from this past spring. And then the other thing I really wanted to point out was, we've been talking a lot about the work that Dr. Kevin Tan's been supporting with us. And so I just want to point out the grant that we received for $45,000 from him, the Healing Illinois grant, which is given to us by the Department of Human Services. We were the only school district to receive the grant, and we received one of the largest awards in the state. So I'm very proud of that. Kevin also received an award for $40,000 for some work beyond our district that is more statewide. So, so we're excited for that and opportunities. So, yeah.
Good news. Yeah. Very, very good. Okay. Questions for Dr. Romo?
Yeah, Nicole, what was two of them, I guess, what was the feedback on Indigenous Peoples Day? And then what are the curriculum changes that are occurring that I see written here in this paragraph?
For ELA?
For the diversity, inclusion, and equity update.
Oh, gotcha. So for Indigenous people, just some random comments from parents just talking about how the switch from Columbus Day to Indigenous people and really talking about less of celebrations of Columbus and more about the founding of the land. So there was some feedback that being maybe more true to the history in that sense. And then with regards to more inclusive curriculum for students, so some of those have been with regards to some of the choices and materials that have been purchased. So materials like here, I know at Middletown, and even all the way through the high school, books that maybe have characters that represent minorities, Blacks, Hispanics, Latinos, and just trying to be very cautious in those material selection, or not cautious, but inclusive in the materials that we're selecting, so all students find books in the library that represent themselves. And then some of the feedback that we've received as Kevin and I are meeting with different individuals in the BIPOC community. It's just this kind of idea that people notice kind of what we do and where we emphasize things, and that there seems to be a big emphasis on holidays and different things throughout the year, but kind of Black History Month and some other kind of set aside times, we may mention it, but it's not as big a deal maybe as Thanksgiving or Christmas or other things that we put forth. And so just really trying to make an effort to be inclusive when those periods come up. So the principals are working with their diversity teams right now so that we can make sure when we celebrate Black History Month or we celebrate women's history that we're not repeating the same thing at each of the schools or in every grade level, because there's a lot of history to be included and a lot of Blacks to celebrate. So we want to make sure that we're not just limiting ourselves to maybe Harriet Tubman and Rosa Parks and Ruby Bridges, that we're celebrating a variety of individuals that have contributed over time.
Any other questions for Dr. Romo? Okay, Dr. Hall.
All right, I'll provide a very quick overview. Just wanted to point out some of the really great things that are happening in our district. There are, things besides talking about the pandemic, and it's nice to be able to focus on some of the other positive and some of the other ways that, that kind of business continues here. Did want to point out that we, not only our school district, but just across the state, and I'm going to guess across the nation, are feeling the effects of teacher shortage. And so some of the positives that are coming out of that are an effort to really try to identify high school students and perhaps even earlier kids who want to go into education. And so I'm part of a group through the Education for Employment system called the Education Pathways Committee to start to put together some really focused activities to try to identify and basically encourage and recruit students who want to go into education, to get them started on that in high school and hopefully get them, the interested ones, on the pathway to becoming public educators or educators of any kind. I mean, everybody needs teachers. So that's been a fun endeavor. And also, maybe this is best saved for the COVID update on our agenda, and we can talk about this later, but we do have the opportunity to conduct some COVID-19 rapid testing here, and we'll have Nita Bachman talk about that when we get to that on our agenda. But that is a positive in moving ahead, and no FOIA requests this month.
Good deal.
Can I make a comment? I was going to say this in the sum, but for the teachers, that at the Illinois Association of School Board Conference, we did pass a resolution for some certificates that they were looking at that was presented by the Teaching Association because of the shortages in the areas of PE, foreign language, and special ed. The short-term approval, they'll have some endorsements that can change and go, and they will not be issued after June of 2023, but they're moving forward with changing things to make that. So I was going to say that earlier, but I have a copy of that language if you'd like it, but it specifically was this past weekend, which I thought was interesting too.
Okay, questions for Dr. Hall? Okay. Now we're into regular business, and we handled 1 and 2 already in the consent agenda, and thank you, Ken, for making that, for sharing that thought with us earlier. So we're at item 3 under new business, resolution concerning review of hazardous conditions. I think Nick is here in the room. This is kind of an annual item.
Yep.
You want to share anything with us?
I really don't have anything to share, and nothing's changed since last year when this building was built. That was the last time we made changes. And until any new roads or buildings are built, we don't have any changes.
All right.
Keep it simple.
Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the resolution concerning review of hazardous conditions as presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Ms. Larson, is there a second?
Second, Hennessy.
Hennessy on the second. Is there discussion on this? Roll call vote, please.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Hennessy,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes, Nick, thank you for keeping us up to date with the state. Okay, next is item 4, class rank and proposed board policy 6:355. Chad Benedict, and Colleen's gonna help some of this, or comment some.
All right, thanks for the patience. Tonight, I just kind of want to walk everybody through kind of the process we've been through since October, when we spoke about an academic recognition plan. So just to review things quickly, we currently use a top 10 system to recognize our students at graduation. Top 10 is determined by cumulative GPA, and we're still using a weighted graded system. During the spring of 2019, we started taking some measures to examine the social, emotional health of our students. And one of the things that we found during this that when we got feedback from our students was stress levels around grades and peer comparison, etc. That's what our students were telling us. So as an administration team with our division heads, we began researching kind of just different ideas and options as related to the social emotional piece. One of the pieces that we looked at was class rank and the weighting of grades. Mr. Leibauer, one of our school guidance counselors, he's also the division head for support services, surveyed schools that are ranked higher than Mahomet-Seymour in the state of Illinois, and then surveyed some schools that are like us demographically. He also has the luxury of talking to a lot of college admissions reps as they came through our building to recruit our students. And what he found in those surveys was that a number of schools had transitioned away from a traditional class ranking system, and that college admissions were transitioning away from looking at as well as one of the criteria to get into college. So in the fall, during that summer then, and then in the fall of 2019, at the division head retreat in the summer, we developed the division heads and admin started working on an academic recognition plan that would address some of the concerns that we had. The plan was given to division heads to take back to staff for review. We made tweaks and changes, and then after the first of the year, the plan was to unroll it in campus conversation in the spring of 2020. Of course, then COVID came, and we did not do that. The academic recognition plan that we had come up with was to start with the class of 2025. So during COVID, as you're well aware, ISBE recommended that we consider pass-fail grades, which we did. And then we got into August when our counselors came back from summer break, and we started seeing some scheduling concerns about, if the student took a certain class and they weren't able to get the AP points or the honors points, and how that impacted their class rank. And then we saw some kids trying to maybe load up on schedules or asking questions about scheduling or taking classes, wanting to take classes away from Mahomet-Seymour to catch up on the points, so to speak, for class ranking. Shortly thereafter, all within the same week, we were scheduled to present at the August board meeting about our academic recognition plan for the class of 2025, and then Dr. Schultz also proposed a new board policy on academic recognition. Do you remember we went back to the drawing board and we started working on a plan that would incorporate some of the concerns that Dr. Schultz had raised and some of the things that we had been seeing at school as well. Worked with Dr. Hall and Dr. Schultz and our division heads to make some revisions to the plan. It's been revised several times. Once we got it narrowed down, we bounced feedback off our Principals Advisory Committee, which is a student-led group of about a student participation group that the principals at the high school work with. There's about 50 students in that group. And then last week, we held a campus conversation virtually on WebEx, and we invited all high school students and all staff to attend. And we got feedback from that process. One of the big questions that has come up throughout this is like, how has it impacted students and why the change? And as you've seen in the information that we shared, we're proposing two different systems. One for juniors, current juniors and seniors, and then one for the freshmen and successive classes thereafter. Last year, as ninth graders, or current 10th graders, there were 53 students that took one honors class and 46 students that took two honors classes. Those students did not receive their points for the weighted GPA. The 10th graders is a little more telling, our current 11th graders. I won't go through all the numbers, but you can see that there are a significant number of students. We had 32 students alone who took 3 honors classes,
last year in the spring that did not receive their points in our weighted grading system. So certainly there's a number of kids that lost out on those opportunities, and that's the equity piece that we started looking at that we found to be challenging as to how we were going to address that. Which leads us to tonight. We developed a modified honor system. It is a blend of a previous recognition and the proposed new one starting with the class of 2024. We went with a 3-tiered system, and you can see the numbers that we proposed in terms of GPA or places them in a certain percentile in their class. The truth is we're not 100% sure how or where our students are going to finish as they're impacted by what they went through in the spring. We just know that they've been impacted. And so I think our hope is that this plan will address some of the concerns that we have in regards to the students in the junior and sophomore class. Then as we move into the freshman class, and all successive classes, we transition to strictly a GPA recognition system. We still stick with the same 3-tiered system of honors, high honors, and highest honors, but but students would qualify according to GPA. They would be in competition essentially with themselves. We like the idea of setting some goals, so if a student has a certain GPA, they can work towards another goal, but there's towards another recognition if they like. But it simply lets students compare themselves just to them. The other thing that I want to point out too that we had a lot of discussion about is with our building leadership is we have a 3.9 in the honor system, and that's to recognize we may have students who go through our programs and say maybe they're on a CTE track, or they want to, maybe the military is their track, and they don't take a lot of honors courses, but maybe they take every class they're supposed to and do really well on that in those courses. This still gives them the recognition that we feel like they deserve. This is not different. The commencement speeches is not different from the last time that I presented. Students would apply. We look to give the commencement speech, and then there'd be a panel of people that would screen those speeches. We've talked to several schools that do it this way, and they really like it, and they've been doing it for a number of years. So it's been an interesting process to go through. I appreciate the feedback and working with Dr. Schultz on this and Dr. Hall. I've learned a lot. It's certainly been a year of adjustments in a lot of areas. And the junior and sophomore class was not something maybe we anticipated until, like I said, when we got into scheduling. Also want to note that we decided, based on feedback from our students too, that the senior class was already really far into the process, and so changing that on them now would have been really, really tough for them. So that's why they're not included in this plan, and they would stay as is. So I don't know if Dr. Schultz wants to add anything, or if there are any other questions that you have. I'd be happy to try to answer.
Colleen, anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I just would like to say it has been a true pleasure to work with Chad, and that Chad and his staff, particularly Tim Leiberger, have done a fabulous job and really considered the students. The board piece is simply the board policy that supports what Chad and his staff have outlined, and pretty much follows the IASB guidelines for policy. And so I'm just really pleased with what great work they did. And I also, I've mentioned this already to Mr. Benedict, but I would like to say too how much I appreciate that he thought about students who were maybe not college bound or not on that track and wanted to go somewhere else, but still achieving very high standards academically to figure out how to recognize them. And so I really that went along with his goals that he presented last time. And I just really appreciated that among all the other things. So thank you, Chad.
Thank you. One last thing I want to add is the timing of this now is our students will start signing up for classes in January. So we felt like it was important that, should we decide to do this evening, that our students know this as they sign up for classes in the future.
One question, Chad.
Yes.
So the GPA bump for honors courses then will just become a one-year anomaly?
Good question. We're not changing how we, if I'm understanding the question correctly, is we're not changing how we calculate our grades. That part will stay the same. It's just we're changing up what we recognize. Does that answer?
I was thinking one slide showed that there were honors classes that had the list of all the students that did not get the additional points on their GPAs.
Correct. So those students last year from spring, they did not receive any points.
Gotcha.
And that's why the modified honors recognition system is a little bit different than what we'll transition to with just the current freshmen.
But that will include
pretty much he's giving them a curve for the next 2 years.
Okay.
Right? Like if, we might lower the standard a little bit if that COVID problem decreased people a little bit, we can bring it down.
Yeah. Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Chad?
I just want to say thank you to Chad and his staff and to Dr. Schultz for working on this. It's kind of interesting that it started in a different place prior to the pandemic and then had to evolve and ended up, I think, really coming out to help kids in a really positive way. So thanks to both of you and thanks to the high school staff and to the kids who gave input too and the parents who joined you last week.
I really appreciate the work that you put into it, and I certainly understand the thought process. I guess I struggle with it a little bit because in some ways I think that excellency should be honored at the highest levels. And that number two, that even though we're trying to help with those stress levels, that we miss out on an opportunity to learn how to cope with some adversity when you set goals and somehow you miss the mark. And that that's part of life, that we have to figure out how to deal with that and move on. And that also that, that achieving that highest GPA isn't the be all end all, which I think this does, but it takes some of that learning process of our students out of trying to balance that out, to try and figure that out. So I feel like we're taking some opportunities away from our students to really learn and grow as young men and young women into adults where they won't necessarily be able to compare themselves or could just do a comparison with themselves when it comes to the job market or professionally, that there's going to be competition amongst peers and we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that. And if you haven't been exposed to that adversity along the way, then we miss out on some of that. I don't know, that's where my struggle with it.
Sure. And I think your comments are fair. Those are conversations that we had with our staff and our division heads about that. I think in talking with other schools that have transitioned to the nuts and bolts of it are different for every school, but have transitioned away from a numerical class rank. Some of the feedback that they shared with us is that they had the same concerns that we did, and that's helped with that. And then balancing that with the overall mental health of the students was something they set out to try to improve, and this did that. I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, that's a conversation we had as far as that's a real thing as far as teaching them to, you know, what life skill do we want to teach them and what they want, what do we want them to leave high school with?
That's what I think we have to think about is, are we really helping their mental health by removing a stressor? Where a stressor is an opportunity to learn everywhere else in life.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I think for us and our team it was, because it was, we see it a lot. And I mean, I know we talked at the last board meeting about, you know, like our school improvement goals, so around social emotional health and things like that. And we continue to see that. I mean, I think the feedback that we get from our staff and from our students is and certainly this year, COVID hasn't helped us that. That's the number one thing I think our teachers are going through right now with our students. And starting clear back, like I said, this conversation started in 2018, long before COVID. But it's something that's been on our staff's minds and radar for a while, and trying to take, you're aware of all the initiatives we've got in place to try to help with that.
Other comments or questions? Okay. Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve Board Policy 6:335 and the changes in the academic recognition program at Mahomet-Seymour High School as they have been presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved, Larson.
Larson, is there a second?
Second, Hennessy.
Hennessy on the second. Further discussion or comments?
I've heard from a lot of parents that they're very happy with these changes, so I think that most of the feedback that I've heard thus far has been positive. And if people had any concerns after they understood the program a little bit better, some of those concerns kind of evaporated. All of the feedback that I've received so far has been really positive.
Good. Anything else before we vote? Dawn, we have a roll call vote, please.
Schultz.
Colleen?
Time, Colleen.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Schultz.
Yes.
Thank you. Giles.
Yes.
Larson. Yes. Keith.
Yes.
Hennessy.
Yes.
Hendricks.
No.
McComb.
Yes. Okay, Chad, thank you.
Welcome. Thank
Appreciate
you.
all your work on this.
Thanks, Chad. Thank you.
Number 5, settlement agreement. Dr. Hall.
I recommend that the board vote to approve the settlement agreement.
Okay, superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the settlement agreement between DC and all versus the Board of Education of Mahomet-Seymour 3 and all. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved, Larson.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I do agree with the general gist of the settlement. I do believe one of the statements I believe to be false, and so I can't vote for that. I just want to let you know why. I'm going to be voting no.
I'll just comment, I personally don't like this at all. But our attorneys have recommended that it's a judicious thing to do and they're paying for this. And so I will reluctantly support it because it appears to be the adult thing to do.
I will not be supporting this mainly because I had asked for some pieces of information so that I could better understand what we were being asked to decide on, and I was never afforded the ability to look at that. I have some concerns that even some of the previous board members who aren't on the board anymore have more information about this case than I do. So I just don't feel like I'm in a position to be able to vote for something that I don't have all the pieces of.
Any other comments? Roll call vote, please, Don.
Keith,
I abstain.
Larson,
Yes.
Hennessy,
No?
Hendricks,
Yes.
Schultz,
No.
Giles,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. Number 6, approval to go to bid for high school boilers. Dr. Hall.
Okay, thank you. Might also just call on, let the board know Steve Curtis is here to add any expert comment on boilers. Back in August or September, the board approved an amendment for health life safety money to approve the funds to pay for the replacement of boilers. That amendment has been approved. And after discussing the current situation with our boilers at the high school, we feel the need to move ahead with replacing 2 of those immediately. So approving this is only just to approve going out for bid. It doesn't obligate us in any way, but we will get to work on putting the necessary documents together in the next couple of weeks, going out to bid, and then the goal to bring back for review and approval a bid at the December 14th board meeting. So this is just approving to go out for bid on replacement of 2 boilers.
Superintendent recommends the Board of Education authorize the superintendent to let bids be taken, the bids for one replacement of the 2 non-operational boilers at the high school. Bids will be taken with the intention to bring them for review and approval at December 14th Board of Education meeting. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion or questions?
My question would, we can get them that quickly? The bids for boilers?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
I didn't know if you meant the bid to.
Steve, how many,
Just the bids, I
is
want to
it
do it.
correct that we have 4 boilers at the high school?
The high school is designed with 4 boilers in place. We currently have 2 operational boilers. Both of them are not in great shape. There is real concern whether they'll make it through the year. We're hoping so. We're doing everything we can to keep them going. But if we lose one of the existing 2, we probably won't be able to keep up with the heat load.
That was my recollection, that we need to have 2 going.
Right, in order to maintain consistency or contingency throughout the building. So, the boilers have been failing over the last 4 or 5 years. Again, we've taken extra measures to try and keep the 2 existing boilers going, and we're confident that they're functioning right now, but we are seeing a lot of problems with them and increasing problems. Replacement of 1 boiler would be great. 2 would be best scenario right now, with the plan of replacing 2 more in sometime in the near distant future.
Steve, what's the rough age of the 4 boilers that are there?
I think they're 10 to 12 years old.
All 4?
Yes. My understanding was that they replaced all 4 at one point about 10 to 12 years ago. And I could be off on that. I haven't dug into the history of it.
That doesn't seem that old.
It doesn't. No.
So if 2 kind of went the way they just did, can we expect the other 2 doing the same thing soon?
It wouldn't surprise me. We lost heat exchangers on the first 2. They failed, and once they failed, there's, I think the cost of replacing one was somewhere around $60,000. Replacing of the heat exchanger itself was in the $40,000 range. So, and the 4 units are identical. Yeah, wouldn't surprise us if we lost a heat exchanger.
So the overall goal here is replace all 4.
In the big
term.
picture, yes.
Okay. So if we got bids back in December, if we were to act on a bid or 2 to replace 1 or 2 of them in December, how far out would we be?
It'd be in the spring.
Okay.
I think we'd have a little bit of the heating season left by the time that project was.
So we kind of got to make sure the two keep going through the winter.
Right.
And we already authorized this to be considered health, life, safety, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes. And it was for the full replacement of, I don't have time to talk for this, that was, the recommendation was based on replacing all 4 units. We're looking at just, as Lindsay said, just replacing the 2 units. And we can maintain, if we replace the two dead units, then we can, maintain the building adequately and have some contingency in operation, until we can replace the other 2 at another time.
Can you lessen the burden on the other 2 and work the new ones harder?
We can balance that out, yes.
Just curious whether a staging, have 2 that are newer than 2 more at any given time is actually smarter than having all 4 replaced at once.
So the goal is to, again, to replace the 2 dead units now, and if we could do that, then we would end up with 4 operating boilers again. With the plans at an appropriate time down the road, replacing the 2 old ones as they fail.
But if we could squeak out a few years out of those, we'd
Sure.
maybe do better going forward.
Exactly. But again, by doing this now and in this manner, we can maintain assurance that we'll be able to keep the building.
Yep. Understand.
That would be important.
Yeah. The manufacturer that's in it now, I'm told they didn't have a good reputation. The equipment that's in there now, they're kind of failures throughout the industry. So it's kind of why they're short-lived.
So we get a different manufacturer?
Yes.
That, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Steve, is there any economy of scale by replacing all 4 at one time? Any savings in doing it that way, or is this the best approach?
Without seeing bids come in, I'm not sure if I can answer that. I think that I think this is a very economical way of doing it and a wise way of doing it. To do all 4 at one time would be a massive project. I think this is probably the best way to do it. But I know I didn't answer your question, but we might save a little bit by doing all 4 at once, but
Well, and we actually don't have the health, life, safety money available at this time for all 4. So then we'd have to take it out of operating costs, or do another bond issuance, which I don't recommend with our future plans.
And where does this leave us with funds for health, life, safety? And would we consider the boilers the most urgent facilities need that we have? Obviously, 2020 and COVID has called ventilation systems and airflow into question. Is this a more urgent need for us to assess and remedy than something related to airflow?
our ventilation systems are functioning according to design. Without the boilers, if we were to lose at least one boiler right now, we'd be shutting the high school down until we could come up with some sort of supplemental heat for the entire building during the winter, which I don't know what that would be at the moment. It'd be a drastic measure to try and keep it going. So,
And then Heather, thank you. That answers my question. Heather, so does this deplete our health, life, safety funds? Do we have anything available for something if we were to assess the ventilation?
Well, first I have to see where the bids came in, and then I can answer that. I'll get that information together for you.
That's fair. Thank you.
Any other questions, board members? Right, again,
The front and get like a hold on it.
Yeah. Yeah, we're just getting bids at this point. And then we'll know more. All right, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Giles,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Hennessy,
Yes?
McComb.
Yes. Number 7, proposed revisions to board policies 1:10, 3:10, and 6:10. Dr. Hall and Dr. Roman.
Great, thank you. And thank you for the support to move ahead with the boilers as well. These are just proposed revisions to 3 board policies that would add language that would reflect the work that we've been doing in the district and will continue to do related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is the first reading for these, and just wanted to bring these forth for discussion. It's a way to kind of solidify in board policy that there's a commitment to this work. I don't know that it simply kind of envelops and embraces the work that we're doing. It doesn't really change the direction of it or anything like that, but it does, I guess, in a sense, shows the board's commitment to this work and continuing to move ahead with it by revising these 3 policies. I'll leave it at that, and certainly open to any suggestions or questions.
Okay, this is not an action item this month. I'm assuming those will come back
in December
next month based on discussion today. Okay. Any thoughts for Dr. Hall and Dr. Roman? Hearing none, if you have come up with anything on that you think needs to be considered, please get that to Dr. Hall, and then we'll see those policies again, I'm assuming next month. So, very good. Number 8, approve full-time health EOP positions for 2nd semester. Dr. Hall.
Hey, making a request to the board to increase our 3 new part-time health EOPs to full-time starting 2nd semester. The reason for this is that we are seeing an increased need for their work and their services. They're currently working 5 hours a day. The health EOP in this building, Middletown Prairie Elementary, is already full-time. Stacy Fisher was hired to replace one of our other EOPs who retired. But at Lincoln Trail, the junior high and the high school, the EOPs that were hired per the approval of the board this summer were put at 5 hours a day. We see a need moving forward, especially with the implementation of the rapid testing that we foresee getting. They're very involved working directly with Nita Bachman on a daily basis, working with contact tracing and also with communicating with our parents. We do see more and more of this work coming onto our shoulders as the Champaign-Urbana Public Health District finds themselves becoming busier as well. So just asking for approval to make those 3 people full-time starting 2nd semester.
Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve increasing the health EOPs at Lincoln Trail, the junior high and the high school full-time for the 2nd semester. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion or questions?
I'd actually like to consider tabling this issue. I think right now, especially given guidelines from CUPHD, what we have, the medical environment has told us with respect to the next 3 or 4 months, the things that we have in front of us. I'd like to suggest we table this till January, where we have a better idea of what our schooling will actually look like, and make those hiring decisions if we are at a place where the model that we're employing for educating kids would still require this full-time move.
Okay, we've got a recommendation to table. Was that a recommendation or a motion?
I didn't amend the motion. I can if you need me to, but it's just my suggestion that we do that. I think we have a lot in flux. And so to make a decision tonight on something that's, 6 to 8 in a very volatile day makes a big difference, that it might be prudent for us to just wait until we have a better understanding of what January actually looks like before we make this move.
So you have to make a motion to table that before we can the tabling.
Thank you, Colleen. I move to table this until January.
Is there a second on the motion to table?
I'll second it.
Okay, Dr. Hall or Anita's here. Would anyone like to speak to the timing on this and why we're looking at this now, and what the benefit or risk may be if we were to decide to table?
Well, I'm willing to speak into it. It affects me directly, so I'm gonna jump in. I actually would like to have them tomorrow. So if all that said, I realize that we're looking at second semester, but every day is busier. And I have some of these ladies who are answering my emails well into the evening already. So they're working far beyond the hours that we're paying them already. They're doing things I haven't been able to do for years as a single entity. And COVID has only exacerbated that. So I am highly in favor of adding them. If we're going to have, right now, the plan that we have on the table is that we're going to have kids back. If we have kids back and we don't vote on this until the end of January, I can't guarantee how that's going to look. Because if we have all the kids in the building, we add all the medical issues that we have along with all the COVID things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. I think that will quickly drown us.
Any other thoughts or comments on tabling this?
I just want to say I really appreciate and value that thought, and I understand. I get that. I feel like just a hallmark of COVID is having to make these decisions with the information that we're kind of currently presented with, and that's why it's brought forth. But I do appreciate. I completely understand making the recommendation to table it. I would agree with Nita, but I just wanted to say that I do understand that. And I was second that as well. I mean, I do understand if we end up being fully remote, then there's the question for the next few weeks. But I also feel that we can't wait to make the decision until until a January board meeting. That's all.
Can we at least put it off until the December board meeting? If we're not thinking about it till the next semester? I mean, my only concern is I don't want to obligate us to have positions if for some reason we don't have in-person school to have that obligation. It seems like January's far away in the days of COVID. So maybe next month as a middle ground.
I think part of this will come into the COVID conversation, Dr. Schultz. I think that it's all kind of tied together. So I don't know if you want to incorporate that, but with some of the testing and some of the things we're talking about, I don't know. I think that there are some things that we could. We're busy.
We're busy.
Right now, it's not going to go, whether we're remote or we're in person, some of this work is not going to go away. So I guess that's a thing to consider as well. But obviously, you guys have to make that decision.
I look at this through the eyes of an employer. I don't think we should continue pushing people or expecting more from them than what we've agreed to pay. I think to move forward, recognizing that is the right thing to do.
Other comments on tabling or discussion on tabling? All right, this is on the motion to table. Can we have a roll call vote?
Hennessy,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
Childs,
No.
Hendricks,
No.
Larson. No. McComb.
No. So the motion is back on the floor on the recommendation. Is there further discussion on the recommendation?
This is Ken. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Nita, you mentioned that you and I think maybe other staff members are working late into the night on these things. Can you help us understand what tasks you're performing outside of work hours?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I take phone calls as late as 10 o'clock at night right now because parents are calling, needing to know what's going on. I'm updating the website all the time. Depends on when I'm taking the calls. Actually, as we're moving forward, that it's only getting busier. I have a couple days that I started working at 5:30 in the morning and I ended my evening at 8 in the evening. So it just depends on the day. Not all days are like that, but in the last couple weeks, as you can see, the numbers are going up, and all of that detail involves communication with parents, communication with public health, communication with our buildings, with our administrators, with Dr. Hall. It's pretty much it's all the time. And you can't put it off to the next day, because if you put it off till the next day, then it's just compounded. So I can't keep up. So, and the staff are phenomenal. What they're doing and what they have added to this year and is amazing. And again, we're updating spreadsheets, we're talking with administrators. I worked all weekend with one of the administrators on a case. So we are trying to do in district what public health is unable to do for us right now. They're taking care of every single school in the district. And not every school's doing what we are doing.
In the county.
And in the county,
Yes,
sorry.
county,
And the district. So they're taking care of all the schools in the county. They have one person that's doing that. And what I'm doing in our district, a lot of other districts aren't doing, as far as the contact tracing, as far as working on what that needs to look like, connecting with the parents. I've heard from a lot of parents who aren't hearing from public health right now because there are thousands of calls behind. So that's, in a nutshell, what I'm spending my life with these days.
Okay, and can you tell us, has public health asked the district to take these responsibilities on, or did we decide to do that?
We started this, I started with a relationship back in August with the one school liaison with public health. And I talked with her after everything blew up. It had been a couple weeks since I had been able to talk with her. I emailed her. She called me the other day and she wanted to tell me how much she appreciates what we are doing that some districts aren't able to do. She asked, I actually put together a procedure and a protocol for how we are handling things in district with our administrators, with Steve, and how we handle things and the verbiage that we use with parents. And she actually took that and shared it with other districts to give them an idea of what to do, because she too is working the kind of hours I am, trying to keep up with the rest of the county. So nobody asked me specifically to do this, but if I didn't do it, then a lot of what we are seeing, the reason that we're still open in November and the reason we've been so successful is because of the efforts that we're putting forth in-house.
If we weren't doing this, families would not be notified of exposures or positive cases for a lot longer of a time than they're currently getting notified for.
I'm getting people out of school within, if I find out about a positive case, parents have been phenomenal. They're calling me if they turn positive, if they have mom or dad are positive, they're calling me. I am able to, within a day, that same day, get all of the affected people out of school and into quarantine easily 4 or 5 days before they would get contacted by public health.
And seeing public health has admitted that they can't keep up. I know that with my husband, at his work, someone hasn't heard back from them since last Tuesday and asked if we could share our policy with them because we've got a really good policy going on. And so thank you for that.
Sure.
So I don't know how the rest of the board feels. I mean, let me just start out by saying I'm extremely grateful for the hard work that you're putting in. Please don't take this the wrong way. But I would be more inclined to, like Merle said, I don't want to expect our workers to work more than they're being honestly paid for. I would be more inclined to have our district let public health handle their responsibilities and we focus on what our responsibilities are. And it sounds like other districts are doing that very thing. I'd be curious to know how the larger districts in our county are handling these.
Well, they're not open. Public health, actually, the lady that I spoke with, public health, thanked me for what we were doing and asked me to please continue.
Yeah.
We are not asking, I am not asking these ladies to work more than their hours. They're doing that on their own. We are not expecting that. We are not asking that. All that we're asking for now is to reward them and let them have full hours so that they can work within the hours and that it takes some of the burden off of me because they have the ability to do some of the things I cannot delegate to people who aren't here.
So I get that. My point is the people at public health are funded federally, state, and locally to perform these responsibilities. You know, I'm sure the village would be extremely grateful to us if we had Mr. Curtis out patching potholes on the road in town. But again, that's not our realm of responsibility.
Sorry, Ken, I didn't mean to, go ahead.
Ken, I think the opposite. I think we've got a duty to our own parents, staff, and students to do everything we can to keep them safe in this manner, and that we should. And I think the 20 grand here is actually a relatively small investment, but to be able to continue that. I appreciate the leadership we have, and I think it's a duty, and I don't want to have to rely on the government if they'll never keep up.
Okay, I accept the possibility that I'm just in the minority here.
I do agree. We have a duty to keep our parents and students and teachers safe.
Can you just, if we are in a situation where we are forced to go remote only, what would the workload be? Do we still have work that would be able to be accomplished by you and these folks? I'm just trying to understand where the dollars, what workload would those transition over to if we're in a scenario where the kids aren't in the building?
Sure. Actually, I think that the workload would stay very similar to what it is, partially because, as I said, part of this conversation will morph into kind of our last item. But if we start doing testing, then that would be for not only in-person people, but for our remote students and staff, and all of our staff as well. So once we start doing that, it will be impossible to do it without extra hands because it's going to be in every building. And that's a thing that, again, I think we are looking at continuing to do the interventions and run interference for our district only, for those people in our district that need questions answered, that the quarantines, they don't know what to expect. And if we can keep our district safer, if we can keep our students and staff safer, then I think, again, that's how I take that personally, as my personal responsibility to try to manage that. So every single one of these people is going to be busier helping with all of that. So, and then if we have all students back, then that's exponential anyway. We're going to be crazy busy, but that's part of it. That's just part of what we do. But if we're all remote, we still will have those things to do as far as the mitigation, as far as talking with parents, as far as follow-up. And I don't see that changing. We're not going to stop working with our parents just because they're not in the building.
Okay.
Well, I would say that because of what you are doing,
You can help.
we're not doing it. Thanks. If we're able to notify parents and students and staff days sooner than what public health could.
Right.
I would submit that not only are we doing a much better job of protecting the people whose lives have been entrusted to the district, our students and our staff, but I would say we're also doing a service for our entire community. Because not only are we stopping spread in our buildings, we're stopping spread in our community.
That's what I'm trying to assist with.
And I'm assuming if we were in a situation where we were remote for some period of time, whatever that period of time is, there'd be an end to that period where we would want to come back and bring folks back in the building. And coming back in, we need to know who still needs to be in quarantine, who's been ill, who's whatever. Because just because we were to open the doors back up, doesn't mean that everybody would be invited back in. There would be some people who would need to complete.
And we have to keep up with that to know.
And we have to keep up on it to know it. If we don't keep up on it, then we don't know it. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, Nita, you mentioned putting the process down on paper. Could you please send that to the board? I'd be interested to read those policies and that process, if you could share that with us.
Sure.
And then I guess the last thing, which probably seems like a flip-flop, but I guess I didn't understand the scope and breadth of what people are doing. If we really have people who are working beyond their contract hours, is January soon enough? Or should we be, I don't feel good about asking people to work if we're not paying them. And so should this be something that we should be doing more immediately than January?
I would be fine if you amended the motion to make this full-time immediately, given the impending.
Should we do it, if we were to do that, should we do this?
I amend,
Well, whenever.
I amend the motion to start immediately.
Can we make it start at the beginning of the next pay period? That way we.
And we'll get it, that's, payroll will get it figured out.
Really get it figured out.
Brilliant.
As soon as administration can.
I just want to
I mean,
make, in our neighboring district who's not been live, their nurses are busier than they normally were, and they're still doing contact tracing and all of that. You don't just get COVID at school, obviously, because these kids are remote. We live, there are people out living, going to places. So I appreciate this coming forward now, and I appreciate that people can open their minds and listen and maybe change where they started from the beginning, because it is so important. Because I mean, it's valid that what someone said earlier, we are paying taxes for that, but it's not getting done. And we are the biggest employer now, and we can take care of our community, and it's an opportunity missed out on if we don't do this.
Okay, so there was.
I'd like to second Colleen's motion.
Okay, so we've got a motion, that's where I was going. I wasn't sure if we had a second or not. So we've got a motion to amend this to make it effective immediately, and that has been seconded. Right?
Well,
Right.
Should we just
Can
say
I
it's?
ask a question now that I've made a motion?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I have a question.
Ed, can I ask a question now that I've made a motion?
Sure.
Will these people do that? I mean, like, we didn't ask them, right? Like, do you want to work full time tomorrow? I mean.
Yes, I actually have spoken with, yes, they will.
Good question.
Let the record reflect the board doesn't want to force any of them against their will.
Right.
If you know what I'm
And
saying.
we'll trust you to work with them on that.
And the last question I actually have is for Heather. Is there money to pay them this?
Yes, there is. So.
Thanks.
I asked her to.
Yeah. They were passing the can at the door tonight, you missed it.
They were seen working after hours.
Okay, so the amended motion is on the table. We will vote on the amended motion. If we pass the amended motion, we will not need to vote on the original motion. If the amended motion fails, the original motion will still be on the table. So this is an amended motion to start.
I believe you have to vote on the amendment and then vote on the main motion. There has to be 2 votes here.
You have to vote to accept the amendment, and then you would have to vote on the amended motion.
Okay, so this is a vote to accept the amendment, that we move this to an immediate, as soon as it's feasible, start. Dawn?
Hendricks,
Yes.
Hennessy,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Larson. Yes. Giles.
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes, all right, now, the original motion that we approve this, and of course, that would now include the amended part that we're starting as soon as practical. Any further questions or comments?
I just want to say it's really important that we protect our students, staff, and community. Thanks.
Roll call, please.
Larson. Yes. Hendricks,
Yes.
Giles.
Yes.
Hennessy,
Yes.
Keith,
No.
Schultz,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. All right, we're closing in on 2 hours in. We've not had a comfort break yet. We've got a couple items left. We're gonna take about a 5-minute comfort break, and then we'll come back with items 9 and 10. Jared, if you pause us for 5 minutes, we'll be back. Okay, I understand we're back up and live, so thank you for that little break. We are at agenda item 9, diversity, equity, and inclusion. This was the discussion that Megan wanted to have on a board level committee. You guys there?
I'm here now.
Okay.
I'm here.
All right,
I don't
item
think,
9,
I don't see Colleen.
this is a discussion.
I don't think Colleen is here.
Huh?
I don't see Colleen here yet.
I only see you.
Oh, I thought I saw a seat.
Colleen, you there?
It looks like she does there.
Well, her computer is still up. She's still in the meeting. That doesn't mean she's there. So I think we need to make sure when we come back from these breaks, we do a roll call to make sure everybody's back.
Colleen, you with us? Okay, Colleen, Ken, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
All right. This is agenda item number 9, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee. This is regarding the board level committee that Megan had requested. You want to share anything on that?
Yeah, I move that the Mahomet-Seymour Board of Education create an inclusion and diversity committee focused on inclusion and diversity in our schools.
Okay, motion's on the table. Is there a second?
Second that.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second on the table. Okay, discussion.
Yeah, if I could have a minute or two, since this was something that I brought to the board. I just want to reiterate that I think it's really important to have board level attention to something like this that goes on into our schools. I think the community came and asked us for this. I think it's not just the board needing to provide good leadership on this. I feel like this was something that the community came and the students came, in fact, and asked us to take a look at this level. I feel like doing the implementation of this committee shows leadership and commitment to these values that we have in our district. And I think it provides a venue for exploration and discussion of topics that are difficult to discuss sometimes, but would allow the community to participate in a way that it hasn't before. And that ultimately the input that we get from that is going to be valuable, not just within the district, but for the community at large. I feel like this committee is in line with the other board committees that we have. We have finance committees, we have facilities committees, we have a policy committee. We have a parent-teacher advisory committee. One of the things that I just have to say off the top is that these committees are, the parent-teacher advisory committee is supposed to work with the board. The board is supposed to work with that committee to talk about guidelines and discipline, things like bullying. Part of that committee can also include working with law enforcement to develop policy and guidelines regarding reporting and student discipline issues. Part of the parent-teacher committee can be to discuss busing and transportation and safety procedures. Having said all of that, I'm pretty disappointed when I looked at the packet and saw that the superintendent intends to not recommend this committee. I think the community came to us and asked us for help. And I'm very concerned because we see a pattern of behavior of things that the board is supposed to do that for one reason or another, and I can't quite figure it out myself, members of this board in the majority don't want to do the work of the board. The parent-teacher advisory committee is not a board-led committee. The board has not met with that committee. That's something that we have had the superintendent do. The facilities, finance, and policy committees are all committees that don't meet independently as board level committees. Even when we talk to our lawyers, we've offloaded lots of discussions with our law firms and our attorneys to the superintendent. Just last meeting, we took our committee that the board work of looking at a facilities plan and planning for the future and created a separate committee that is going to do that work. I just feel like I don't understand why it is that this board or the members of this board don't seem to want to do the work of the board. And to see that the superintendent recommends that we don't implement this committee, I don't understand why. Clearly had community members and students come and tell us that what we are currently doing is not sufficient. It's not sufficient to support what's going on in the schools. It's not sufficient to support what they are asking us to do to create a safe environment. This would be a board-run committee that I would lead. I've had input and offers from people in the community with areas of expertise to help me with this committee. And yet the last board meeting, we created a committee that we're going to spend $70,000+ with not much more direction than we have for this committee. And then the objections that I heard to forming this committee is we just don't know enough. So for me, I don't know that I'll belabor this because although I think this is important and vital work, I don't hold a lot of hope that this is going to be voted through tonight, and I'm disappointed, but I made the motion with the hope that I'll be proven wrong. For me, this is a matter of people in our district, students, parents, community members, teachers have come and asked us for our help to tackle some really hard discussions, to dive into where we can make improvements around some of these issues, where we can build up support, where we can encourage dialogue and find ways to better support and educate people within our district around these important matters. These are steps that other school boards have taken. These are steps that corporations have taken and put statements out there about the importance of inclusion and diversity. And so I sit here yet again tonight and say that what we are currently doing is a good first step. I think it would be bolstered by board level commitment to this endeavor. And don't want to have to look the people who have come and asked us for help in the eye and say that it appears that the leadership on this board is not interested in having the conversation with you about what it is that you're asking for, what it is that's hurting, and how we might help you. I don't want to offload this one. I think this is one that we need to lead and provide leadership on. And so I'm asking that this motion be voted through and that this committee be created at a board level. That's all I have to say.
Other comments?
I think with our other committees, we've actually got some duties or responsibilities written, and I'm not sure I've seen that here. But I'm curious why you mentioned finance and policy and facilities, and I think I heard you say these committees should work independently. I don't understand that view. Independently of what? Without the administration involved? Without what? How should they be independent?
Marl, that's not, I was making example of this board not doing board work. That was not the point of my discussion. My discussion is that there are things that this board should be doing and should be responsible for that we tend to offload and give away to other people. I don't want this particular item to be one of those things.
I guess I look at I'm sorry, I look at what you're saying is totally different than what we said. We went in our last board meeting at November 2nd, where all of the administrators shared their goals with us. They all had something about diversity, inclusion, and equity. We had a proposal tonight on board packet page 160, where we talked about the same kind of information that we have going on. We've partnered with U of I to work on this. We are calling the experts in to do something. So that might not be your policy 9 that you're recommending for your committee, but we are doing those things. Those came about from people listening. We're gonna have community engagement. We're all to put names. We've gone to these things. I think every one of us attended a forum. So to say that we're not doing that is a difference between half full and half empty. It may not be the same liquid that you want, but we're all engaged in doing this. We're talking about it. We're working at it. So I just don't agree with that. And I think that once again, we are taking away responsibility that we've given staff to take ownership of something and saying, look, let's do it for you. And that is not our job. So I don't agree with it. I'm sorry.
I am not suggesting that what the staff is doing and what the administration is doing in the buildings would change in any way. I am suggesting that board level commitment and input on this topic would simply provide additional input, additional voices, and would signal to the community a level of commitment of this board to this work.
And that's a different opinion because I feel like that's what we have done. That's what Dr. Rummel and Dr. Tan and all the people from the university and the administrators that work with their staff to put these goals together. That's a district-wide commitment. I just don't see how that isn't. That's just a difference of opinion, apparently.
We just approved a committee for the community engagement and so forth with a list of charges from the board and so forth. And I, again, don't see any duties, no recommendations for a charge for the committee here at all.
As far as people that have come to us and asked us to do things, one thing that I know we asked is we asked those people to get involved in what we're doing, right? And it's my understanding that they all, not all of them did, but many of them have come and tried to get involved in the process. Is that not correct?
We've been reaching out, yes,
Yeah.
to individuals. And I think one of the things that we're working with specifically, we're talking about the BIPOC community, is reaching out to individuals of that community and trying to get more of a grassroots where those individuals are letting us know what they need in particular instead of us telling them kind of what they need. Right. But we also are looking for ways to engage other communities other than just the BIPOC, so our low-income families as well. Mm-hmm. It's slow work when you're meeting one-on-one with people and scheduling meetings, but I feel like, honestly, Megan, if there's something that you wanted us to do that we're not doing, I would be open to that feedback and happy to incorporate other ideas. The things that we're doing have all come from ideas from staff or from parents. I don't have a predetermined list. I can just say that we're just continuing to try to move the gauge and to move it forward, but it's so important that we have staff involved and that they have input every step of the way for the changes that are going to impact their classrooms.
I want to be very clear here. This is not a critique on what you are doing, and this is not, I don't want to imply in any way, shape, or form that what you aren't doing you're doing a great job of that. I think what a board level commitment does is adds additional help, additional bodies to do some of the work, additional opportunities for conversation that don't have to be driven by you, who this is not your only job. The board is here to support in many different ways. And so the formation of board committees is a way that the board members and the board can provide additional time, input, and support in ways that employees may not be able to spend all of their time on. So I want to be very clear here that this is not a critique or because I think that in any way, shape, or form, what's being done is lacking. I see an opportunity here for the board to play an active role in helping to facilitate discussions and helping to understand what it is that we are doing as a board with policy and do that better and better support. And until we get in and have these conversations, I can't tell you specifically what that's going to be. All I know is that there was a significant number of the community that came and told us that they would like to see the board take this step, that they think that this is worthy of board level attention, that they have gone, some of them had gone through the school and feel like what's being done needs to be additionally supported. And I think until we sit down and have those conversations and get people in the community in forums, that doesn't have to just be led by the district. That's the reason for board committees. That's the reason that the law suggests that boards have different sets of committees, because there's more work to be done that can be just done by people in the administrative building. Of course, I would include staff. I would have come, quite honestly, I would have come with a bigger outline, and I had done that work. But when I opened the packet and saw that the superintendent doesn't intend to support this endeavor, and I've been around this board long enough to know that the 4 people sitting in the room right now very rarely vote in a way contrary to what the superintendent recommends, I didn't want to spend a bunch of time for something that it doesn't appear has the support necessary to go. There is work that could be done, but if we aren't interested in actually opening ourselves to having those discussions, and we continue to put roadblocks up like I just don't know enough, or if only you had mapped out what this committee was supposed to be doing. This is a committee that will ebb and flow with what we hear from the community. And we've had community members even reach out who were on the facilitation team and offer to help with that endeavor. So I don't think it's a lack of community desire to have a board level committee. For some reason, this board in their majority does not want to have that committee. I don't understand it. I don't agree with it. I'm hopeful that that will change, but I don't want this to be a critique on what you're doing, Dr. Rummel. In no way, shape, or form is that the reason that I am suggesting the creation of this committee.
Let me just explain my thought on this then. My thought is this is a difference, I guess, of opinion and approach. Equity and inclusion, for that to be successful, we need to build that from the ground up. And we need to bring in the support of the people who are going to be, presenting that in our district. And we need to bring in the support of those in the community that feel they've got voices that need to be heard. And I think that's what the present program has been attempting to do. And, you know, board level seems to indicate edicts from the board. And frankly, if folks in leadership in our country could have legislated equity and inclusion into place, we'd be done talking about it by now, because there's been lots of that done in the United States, and it's not gotten us the result that many think we should have. So it really comes down to increasing people's awareness and changing behavior at an individual level. And you build that from the bottom up, not from the top down, which is, I think, what we've been trying to do. So that's my thought, and that's why I've been supportive of our current plan, and I've not been supportive of this particular plan. Dr. Hall, you've been mentioned a couple times. Do you want to say anything on this or no?
Well, I think that there's a lot of discussion that this board could have, and there's been ample opportunity to have that discussion about what exactly the role of board members are, and what are the things that board members, you know, what is the role, what should they be involved in, what shouldn't they be involved in. And I think that there's a clear difference of opinion on that. And that's fine. There's diversity of opinion on this board. My recommendation to not approve this has absolutely nothing to do with the work itself. It has to just do with more the definition of what is board work. And we might just need to agree to disagree on that. I think one part of being a board member is communicating regularly with the superintendent and other members of the administration as well. And I think that there's, work that could be done in that area as well. And so that is my recommendation. I stand by it. Again, it has nothing to do with the work. I think the work is going very well, but it's slow work, and it's about building relationships, and it's about reaching out and having conversations. And we'll just continue to move ahead with the plan that we have. I think I understand that there's some folks that wish it would move faster or differently. I respect that.
Well, I fully reject the notion that you think the four of us sitting in this room don't think the topic deserves discussion, to even have a procedural structure brought to the board to consider the motion.
At the school board conference that I got to go to for the forum this past Saturday, I was proud because it has an equity belief statement, and we are already doing that. It says, the Illinois Association of School Boards urges its districts and the leadership of members of districts to integrate principles of equity and inclusion in curriculum, programs, and operations, ensuring that students are welcomed. And we're working on this. We heard all of this. So I was like, okay, so we are doing that. So again, I'm trying to let the surrounding people give us positive influences. And to me, we're headed in the right direction. We're doing our board work, and that's what we're supposed to do.
So I look at this through the lens of what we already do with our committees. I hope we would all agree that there are some responsibilities that are on the board, and there are some responsibilities that are on our staff. And just like the board is responsible for approving budgets, and the board is responsible for developing and approving facilities plans and evaluating facilities needs, that's also the sort of work I envisioned that this committee would do, would be board level study, board level discussion of these issues that act in parallel to the work that Dr. Rummel and our staff are doing. Honestly, if we can't envision how this committee would work, I don't understand how we can envision the other committees work, and perhaps we should just dissolve those committees. I'm kind of at a loss as to, what do we have to lose here? Let's see where we can go with this committee, and let's see where we can work together to do the board level work with this committee.
Well, I think one thing we have to lose is the cooperation of the University of Illinois.
Why do you think that?
Why do I think that? Because
we have them working in a partnership with us.
Right.
Once again, when we try to put something out there and we ask the experts, which is what we're told to do, now we're doing that, and we're not doing that. And I don't know, have all of you been trained in equity education and facilitating things like that? Because we're talking about laws and regulations and rules that you need to know what you're talking about. And we're gathering that information and we're moving on from there. And I'm ready to call the motion.
Did the staff from the University of Illinois, have they explicitly told us that we should not have a board level committee?
I think there's some confusion as to the role or what the board level committee would do different than what we're already doing.
And again, open to feedback and suggestions for doing that, for partnering together. I think there is definitely some concern about a top-down approach when it's the teachers that have to do the work and that are doing the work. But
So could you make that same argument about our facilities committee?
that the teachers do the work with the facility? Is that what you're saying?
No, that our custodial staff and Mr. Curtis does the work with the facilities. And our facility committee is instituting a top-down approach. Should we abolish that committee?
That's not what we're talking about.
Yes.
The board, well, I mean, the board does not have to have those committees. I mean, that's not a requirement. That's an option. So, I mean, I wouldn't recommend abolishing them. I think there's a place. I think this situation is different. We're partnering with an outside agency that's providing expertise and guidance and resources with us.
I feel like we're getting off point here. I mean, this is either about do we want a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee or not. We already spend hours on professional development with this. We're incorporating it into the classroom. You know, I think I'm not in agreement with any of it anyway. I mean, I feel like our job as a school district, as a school board, is to educate our students, and we spend a lot of time on all this other peripheral stuff. That's why are we here, to educate our students, and we're spending a lot of time talking about this other stuff that really I don't even think is the job of the school board. I mean, it's more politics. This is for our state legislature. This is for some other people. We're about education, and we have fewer conversations about education and curriculum than we have about this stuff. I don't understand. We're a school. We're open. Come to school if you want. If you don't want, stay home.
Hey, Ken, I don't agree with the statement that board committees act in parallel. I believe we act jointly with administration. We on the finance committee work with the key finance person in the district. We, as a board, do approve budgets. We don't make the budget. Same with facilities. We work jointly on what would happen with facilities, but we don't make that happen. It's a joint. So I don't think parallel is the right description. And what I don't see here for a motion tonight is any structural procedures again as to how such a committee would work. I don't agree that it should do the work.
I do agree with Jeremy that education is our primary goal and that we need to focus on that. I actually wish we would spend a little more time talking about curriculum and education, but I do believe that our board has a lot of other responsibilities, like the things we've been talking about, finance and policy and facility and I feel as though in my mind the role of the committees is supposed to be that our full board can't address everything all the time because these meetings already go way longer than they should. And so I guess I've always envisioned that committees would be people on the board who want to work in a particular area, addressing those issues. You might work with the administration, you might work with the teachers, you might work with the parents, you might work with the other board members. And that is the way that more work can be done to help students and teachers and the community. And so if people want to take some of that work on to be able to have us collectively get more done, then I think we should let them. I think we should address these things. More things can be done. We all know that everyone has more on their plate than they have space for. Students, teachers, administrators, board members, parents, everyone is so taxed to the end. And so I feel like if we would stop having a us versus them, you versus me, power, who should have the power, who should have the control, who should do this, and we would work together and we would all work on things, then we would collectively do better. And so I just feel as though when there are things to talk about, and this is why, you know, back the first month that I was on the board, I proposed that we have a curriculum committee on the board, because curriculum is one of our major components according to the law, and we should spend some time talking about it. And as we see, Jeremy just said, we don't spend enough time talking about it, which is probably true. But if there are people who are interested in it, we should let them do it. And that doesn't mean they're going to go from the top down or take over things or make any decisions for that, right? It's just a place to do some of the work and come back to the board so that the board discussions in the board can be more efficient. And this seems to be something that is a major component of what's going on these days. And so I just don't see what the objection is, I guess. I'm confused about that.
This is the second time I ask, is it not okay to call the vote?
Does anyone have anything new to add? If not, I would suggest we go ahead and vote. Lori has asked a couple times that we call the vote. I think everyone's had a chance to chime in and share their thoughts. Is there anything else that someone just feels they need to get in on this? Okay, let's have a roll call vote, please.
Schultz,
Yes.
Giles,
No.
Larson? No. Keith,
Yes.
Hennessy,
Yes.
Hendricks,
No.
McComb.
No. Item 10, COVID update. Dr. Hall.
Well, when actually I worked on this board bar, it was prior to a lot of things that happened in the last couple of days, and so those are just some suggested topics for discussion. I will just quickly address the issue with basketball. There's another meeting this Thursday with the IHSA. And I can't obviously predict what the outcome of that is going to be. I know that the IHSA wanted the governor and the Illinois Department of Public Health to be represented in that meeting. In the governor's press conference today, he said he would not be there and his opinion has not changed. So I assume that that means that IDPH's opinion has not changed on playing basketball. And it's unfortunate, but that is not a direction that I think that we should go based upon the language that's been used surrounding basketball. IDPH did upgrade it to a high-risk activity a couple weeks ago. And you know, that changed. That's not where it sat for months over the summer and up through the fall. And so that's where we stand with that. There are some other winter sports that are medium to low risk and that our kids can participate in, and we'll proceed ahead with those. It is possible to still have non-contact practices with basketball and with wrestling, and we are proceeding ahead with those at this time. So as with everything else, this is kind of a fluid and an ongoing situation that can change.
Is there anyone in the area that's indicated they're going to play basketball? My understanding is there has.
No, not. I don't know of anybody in the area.
So even if we wanted to play,
I don't know who would play.
There's nobody to play.
In terms of of the rapid testing. We mentioned this earlier in the evening tonight. I'm just gonna hand it over to Nita actually to explain what we've done and the testing that we are very excited about getting, and this is another
Excited to hear about rapid testing.
situation where I'm not sure other school districts are gonna be doing this, so I'm proud of us leading the way in this way, so hand it off to you, Nita.
All right, well, so far, we started, Dr. Hall and I had a conversation several weeks ago with the Deputy Director at Public Health always. They, because in some of the things I was reading, it was talking about the antigen testing being available to schools, that they've opened up some free testing. So we spoke with them. We were able to apply for and receive an emergency CLIA waiver that is open to schools right now just for testing, just because of COVID. What that entails is the 15-minute point of care rapid antigen testing, so you get a result back in 15 minutes. What that would mean for us is that we would test only students that are symptomatic, and those students, if they're symptomatic, if they're positive, we would be able to know immediately, be able to quarantine those students and identify in our buildings who would have been exposed and get those kids out of the school right then. Our plan is to open this up to all students in the district, along with all staff in the district. Again, symptomatic. If they are symptomatic and negative, then that necessitates a follow-up test, a PCR test, which is the gold standard, if you will. Right. According to the IDPH guidelines and Champaign Public Health, that's still a standard. So if somebody's negative and symptomatic, then we would send them off. Dr. Hall and I have a meeting with Carl tomorrow to talk about facilitating that second step. And so we'll see what that entails and if that's a possibility. I spoke with their director of operations, their vice president of operations last week, and then they had an internal meeting today, and then we will have a meeting with them tomorrow to determine what is going to be the next step with that. We have a physician at Christie Clinic that has agreed to underwrite us, if you will, that's given us the authorization. So we have a physician order to do so. The testing is not too invasive. Maybe Heather maybe tapped for a few more things as far as biohazard, things that we need to do that. What our plan right now is that we would be able to do it in all 4 buildings. So each building would have a supply of those tests. The health EOP would be responsible for doing that. Every test that we take, negative or positive, will be reported to IDPH every day. So anytime you do a test, you report it. So yeah, it's a little overwhelming to think about as we move into that, but I think that it will benefit us a lot. I think that I've had several other schools reach out to me, asking me if we're doing it. They're interested in what that plan looks like. And there aren't a lot of other schools in our area that are doing it, at least in my contacts. So yeah, so that's coming. Right now, we've had the attorneys have looked at our consent form, so we have a consent ready to go that we'll send out to the staff and to the community and to our families as soon as we determine the actual start date. We kind of were targeting the return in January, just as you come back into school. If we do decide to come back and we have four-day kids, then that would give us a way to perhaps maintain where we're at now, to have a little better handle on what's going on in our buildings. And I didn't want to get the cart before the horse. I wanted to make sure that we have all our ducks in a row before we undertake this endeavor. So that's on the horizon for us.
He answered one of my questions, was do we need consent, which I assumed we did.
Yes.
We would have consent forms.
And we also will have paper forms, so if there's a parent that determines that they want to do that, but they didn't fill out the Google form, but they want us to do testing for their child, we would have a paper consent that they would be able to fill out on the spot.
Where do we get the test, and what is there a cost to us for this?
There is not. That's the beauty of it, which is the reason that we started. I'm all out free if we can get it. So the tests are actually being provided through the IDPH.
Okay.
And so we'll work with public health. Brandon Moline over at CUPHD actually is the liaison for that. So as soon as we determine our dates and the number of testing kits that we want, then I'll submit the paperwork to him and we will get test kits in-house.
How many tests do we have, or will we get?
As many as I asked for. Right now, the CLIA waiver, when I did the CLIA waiver, we did an estimate of how many kids that we typically would have symptomatic or that we send home in any given month. And we looked at like September to May, if you will, or September to April, because that's usually when we have the most kids that are symptomatic. So when I did the waiver, I asked for 10,000. So, and it's not, I could go up a little from that, but I wanted to make sure that we have enough, but I didn't want to have so many that we have them sitting around forever as well. The test it's a great tool, but it's not, the accuracy for asymptomatic kids isn't enough to be able to just do it a couple times a week. Like at the U of I, they can test twice a week. Right. One, the sheer volume of that would be enormous to even try to keep up and report all of that. Does that mean that we'll catch every kid? No, because we all know there are asymptomatic kids walking around now that we may not know about. But at least for those children that are symptomatic, we can know right away if it's a positive COVID test.
So to be clear, the test is more accurate on symptomatic positive persons. Mm-hmm. Right. So just backing up a little bit more, Neve and I kind of began the conversations about testing late August, actually, with Ron Watkins at the University of Illinois, just to see if it was even possible to get the rapid saliva test out here. And we really appreciated his willingness to talk with us. We met with him via Zoom one day, and unfortunately, those tests are just going to be cost prohibitive for school districts right now. I mean, maybe there's a future there, and so this is a good option. It's not testing everybody certainly, but it's a start, and so we're happy about that. Yeah. Questions?
Where does the liability for this testing sit? You said that we have a doctor that's underwriting but where's the liability? And then how does this actually change our policy? I think what you said was that if it's a negative result, that they have to go and have a follow-up test anyway. So I guess I'm trying to understand, is the benefit just that the symptomatic COVID, we know it's immediate, and I don't see how it changes our policy or protocol for people who are symptomatic who test negative on site. And what's the liability with us being wrong about that?
The thing would be, the way that the test works is we have a person who's symptomatic and they test negative, then we would send them immediately for the PCR testing as a confirmation. If they're symptomatic, we would need to send them home anyway. So this would just allow them to, if they have symptoms, they would go get an additional PCR test, and then if they are positive, then they would be identified. If they are positive and they are symptomatic, then we can take that positive and we treat it as a presumptive positive and we quarantine based on that. And that's according to IDPH. And the IDPH guidelines talk about that specifically as far as doing an antigen test, and then it talks about doing the follow-up with the PCR. So what happens along with that is that's why we have the attorneys look at the consent form to make sure that we're covering our bases with that, so that we're doing that. It's not doing anything different than we would do, other than it allows us to offer our students and our staff, our families, the opportunity to know right away. Right now, today, I have had I've talked to no less than 10 people today who have waited for 5 or 6 days now to hear if they've got to get their test results. So they don't know what they're doing. So they're out of school for a week waiting for test results. I had a person in the last week that actually tested positive but didn't get that positive result for 6 days. So thankfully, that person wasn't at school for that whole time. But if you think about somebody coming to school, because a lot of people aren't necessarily staying home while they wait for a test result. And so basically what we would be doing is not really different than what some of the other entities in Champaign are doing. They're doing some of those rapid testings. And this is something that has gone through IDPH that the mandate now is that they've offered this CLIA waiver. You have to have the waiver. You have to do the reporting so that they know what testing that you're doing. And that is a requirement. I mean, there are fines and penalties if you don't follow the state requirements for this, because this comes through the CDC to the IDPH, and then we're just taking advantage of that. It's basically an emergency measure for COVID, for schools, in an effort to try to make sure that schools can stay open.
The goal
So
is
I'm
to
sorry.
So how,
Sorry.
Did you say that if somebody is waiting on a COVID test, that they're coming to school? Isn't that against our policy? Doesn't our policy say that if you are waiting on a test, you have to be quarantined?
Our policy does say, well, and we're telling everybody, we tell everybody that, but I have no control over people that don't tell us they're getting tested. Because a lot of times what happens, I am at the mercy of what people tell me to be able to work on that. So if I have somebody who says, oh, by the way, I got tested last Friday and I just turned positive today, then I have to go back. That's part of like the conversation earlier. Then I have to go back, which public health can't do. I have to go back and determine if those people were in school on the days that they may have been symptomatic or they may have been tested, and then determine who they might have been exposed to in the classrooms, which if it's a student, those students have no idea who sits around them in class half the time in a whole day. So we spend a fair amount of time trying to just follow up and make sure that, that people are being identified. So this will allow us to identify, obviously it won't be a perfect tool, but it will allow us to identify positive cases more quickly than what they're being allowed to do. And parents, even remote parents, if their kids are symptomatic, they can come in. Right now, I'm seeing people, the trend right now is that people are having congestion or a runny nose or something that they think is allergies. And I spoke to a person just a couple days ago. Well, I just have a few allergies. I said, okay, well, go get a test, and they're positive. So the symptoms right now, the only thing that doesn't fall under COVID symptoms are breathing and sneezing, pretty much. So,
but the scenario that you gave before that, you said the student likely wasn't at school.
yes.
Right? Okay, I just wanted to make sure I heard that right.
Correct. Yeah, I was able to go back and determine where that was. So thankfully, they weren't at school for the whole week while they were waiting for a test.
so are we having all symptomatic students for any of these symptoms go home and stay home for the 14 days?
Well, if they are symptomatic, it's 10 days. But right now, what we've been doing up to now is that we're using our triage skills, because I have some kids that have had a runny nose for 3 months because of their allergies. They take Claritin every single day and they have no other symptoms. So some of that comes into knowing the child, talking to the parent. Right now, there's an increase of basic symptoms that in kids that don't have those types of things. So we are sending those students home. We are asking the parents, we're calling the parents, asking the students to go home. We are asking them to contact their physician. And in a lot of cases, their physician or their pediatrician will say, oh, I want to see you. Other times they'll say, no, I want you to go get tested. If they place an order, then the people can go to Carl's drive-through clinic and get a PCR test, but they have to have an order to go through there. So this is where we have a meeting tomorrow to talk about if I do have somebody that has some kind of a symptom, that we'd be able to collaborate with Carl to get that PCR test in more quickly. So yeah, I mean, we are trying to send people home, Colleen, in answer to your question. And sometimes they choose to get a test, sometimes they don't choose to get a test. We have had some people that we've asked them to stay home. We asked them to stay home until their symptoms are gone, for sure. And we have had some that we asked to stay home for 10 days, depending on the conversation that we have with the parent. And if the health EOP has any questions, if the parent has any questions, then the call comes to me. So I'm running interference on both ends for that.
And how many symptomatic kids do we have in school, and teachers and staff?
On any given day, it's hard to tell. I mean, we only know.
I mean, like 2 or 400. I mean, give me a ballpark.
Between 2 and 400. I mean, so I guess that's the thing on any, and I'm not trying to be funny, but on any given day, it depends on there are a lot of factors that go into that. If a teacher sends a student to the office, for example, that they're symptomatic, then we know that student's symptomatic. If there are kids walking around with their masks on that have the sniffles, we may not know that if a teacher doesn't let us know. And in any given classroom, or a teacher, I mean, I have a lot of teachers that unless I were to interview and see every single person every single day, there's no way to really have a handle on that. And that's kind of the challenge, back to Jeremy's question about how many tests we have. It's kind of a guessing game. What we looked at is I spoke with the EOPs who have been here for a long time about what is our average number of kids that we send home or have out on a given day in the winter, for example. During flu season, we have as many as 90 kids a day out in some of our buildings. Now, and I anticipate we'll still have that, even with COVID. We still have strep, we still have the flu, we still have colds, ear infections, all the different things. So it really is, it's hard to say how many symptomatic people we have. I think it seems like everybody has symptoms in the allergy season, you know what I mean, during harvest and things like that. So it's really difficult. It really is kind of a balancing act to try to figure out who needs to go home and who gets to stay and who has symptoms. But so far, I think our staff have done a phenomenal job. I've given them the flow charts that have been provided since August. We've provided that for all of them to follow, and our staff are doing their dead level best to keep things safe in our districts, in the buildings. The custodial staff is cleaning nonstop. So I think that we've done a phenomenal job getting to this point. I anticipate as the winter comes along and we come inside that the symptoms will increase. I think that's just a given.
But if we have 400 symptomatic kids in one day, then how is our highest day of quarantine 30 kids? I mean, that's a lot of people you'd have to send home to quarantine if 400 kids had symptoms all in one day.
Well, if you think about that, you've got 4 buildings. So you've got, you know, if all of our kids are here, you've got 3,200 kids here. So if a kid's walking around with the sniffles and nobody knows that, I mean, who knows how many? I mean, I'm looking at the teachers in this room and I'm thinking, how many of your kids do you know if you have a runny nose or an earache today? Right? So symptomatic, we can only treat and deal with what we know about on any given day. And I think that's the thing. I guess the point is that there's really no good estimate of how many that would be. Today I could say I had 5 kids in each building. In January 1st, it could be 30 or 40 or 50. And if you do that times the district, if I have 30 kids in a building with a runny nose times 4, that's 120 kids. It doesn't take very long to add up when you've got a district as big as ours.
Well, and you continue to say, do the COVID screener. If a kid doesn't feel well,
right,
stay home. We've done that for all the time I've ever been in education, and people still send their kids.
Right.
So,
and we have a lot of parents keeping their kids home this year.
Right.
I mean, I get emails every day that my kid doesn't feel well, so I'm keeping them home for a couple days. That's great, and we encourage that, and we're trying to affirm them in continuing to do that, which helps us.
Thank you for that.
Okay, other thoughts, questions under COVID?
Yeah, I'd like to move that we immediately follow the IDPH and CUPHD recommendations and move to full-time remote learning.
Okay. That's not on the agenda for a vote.
It's on the agenda in its general terms and is available for a motion.
According to ISB, if it's not on the agenda, I'm looking at page 18 of coming to order, then they recommend, because of court rulings, that we not take action on any matter not listed on the agenda as an action item.
But this is a result of COVID being listed on the agenda.
Our board policy does say that each board meeting agenda shall contain the general subject matter of any item that will be the subject of a final action in a meeting. And the board will take final action only on items contained in the posted agenda, not on the agenda may still be discussed.
I'm sorry?
Just get, let's vote and maybe we've debated this for 2 years.
I think it's a disservice to the community to try to put an action on something that clearly was in the agenda as an update and a discussion.
It's been the practice habit.
We've talked about this before. It's unfair.
We've made it
Although in
very
point of
clear
fact,
the time that we've had board meetings that you have been at, that we will have a discussion and an action at the next month. We've talked about that.
in fact, I did ask 7 days ago for this to be on the agenda as an action item.
And I asked in May and April that the COVID be an action item on every agenda moving forward as a result of our need to perhaps pivot and make decisions and not be hindered by the rules of the agenda. Merle asked the same thing. Colleen and Ken both emailed, even for this agenda, that same request.
You know, it's not fair to the community to put general topics on the agenda and then pull specific votes on things that have not been made clear we're going to vote on.
That was never my intent. I think the discussion was worthy.
But we asked for it to be an action item. So here's the problem. If you don't want to take action on something, you just keep it off of the agenda. Clearly, COVID is the single biggest thing that we have to deal with right now. We have had recommendations from the IDPH and the CUPHD. The MSEA came tonight and asked us to take action on this. We were asked in enough time for you to put this on the agenda, and you simply chose to not do it, perhaps to avoid having to take a vote on this. However, our board policy does state that we are within our policy to have a vote and take action on something whose general topic is on the agenda. So I guess my frustration is that we keep having these discussions about procedural things and what we do and don't do on this board that gets in the way of us actually taking action on things that need to be done. And you can say you disagree, but our board policy is very clear about the fact that anything whose general topic is on our agenda is available for action. That is the acting policy that we have in place.
Okay. Well, you know, we talked about possibilities of bringing in keeping an attorney at the meeting table with us every month. Maybe we need to seriously look at that if we can't.
I would love for the attorneys to be here and weigh in on this. I've asked several times for their expertise on whether or not we should be, in fact, ignoring the recommendations of the public health departments. And in fact, our attorneys that we use on their websites make it very clear that they have said that they strongly recommend that we follow the public health guidelines of the experts. But we had an attorney on tonight who suggested that we are taking on liability by not addressing and following the guidelines of the CUPHD and the IDPH.
Lindsay, did you speak with Franzik last week?
I did speak with Forensic last week.
Okay. After the guidelines came out?
Yeah, so my conversation with Shelley Anderson at Forensic was rooted around whether the CUPDH's pronouncement on Thursday was a mandate or whether it was guidance. And in the conversation with Julie Pride on Friday, she made it clear that it is guidance. And she made it clear that it is up to individual districts to decide. And she made it clear that we do not have to follow that guidance. Those are quotes from her. And
I
so,
understand. That's why I'm making the motion so that this board can decide.
talking.
Excuse
Thank
me.
you. So in letting Shelley know that this is guidance from the CUPDH, she said that our local data and continuing to look at our local data is a suitable way to proceed. It's a defensible position to be in terms of, at this point, not going fully remote.
So they did not ask for full remote. The Illinois Association of School Boards said to leave it up for local control. Prairie View, Ogden, Tolono, Mahomet, which are all Fisher, they're all doing at least what we're doing and more. So we're not the only people on the dance floor here.
I am actually making the motion so that this board can take that local control and actually make that local decision. And just so we're clear, when you go see a doctor and they recommend you do things, those are guidelines, those are recommendations. There are very few things in this country of the US of A that we mandate people do. There is some decision-making that has to be done about who experts are and what you do with their guidelines. I'm sure people come to Jeremy and Jeremy gives them guidelines. He's recommending that they do things for their health. He's not mandating that they do that. You go to the hospital and they recommend that you take a course of action and you choose not to do that. Sometimes you have to sign something that says you are discharging yourself against medical recommendations. So that doesn't mean that recommendations that come from experts who have all of the data and the expertise required to make those recommendations should be ignored. So just because it's not a mandate really shouldn't surprise us, because this is the United States and we still live in a free country. But I think when we talk about guidelines that are, excuse me?
I said, I don't feel too free right now. I have people telling me that I can't have my kid be at school, but they can go to Target and they can go to Costco and they can go wherever they want, but they can't go to school where they're entitled to a free and appropriate public education. So don't tell me I live in a free country.
Anyway, I'm just saying that I would like this board to actually make a decision tonight, which is why I brought the motion forward. This board cannot make a decision if we don't go through a motion and voting process. I think it's important that we actually go through the process that we have before us to actually make a decision on what we are doing and whether or not we are following the guidelines. The guidelines changed. They made recommendations. I think it's the duty of this board to weigh in on whether or not we're going to follow those recommendations. Hence my motion.
I think we already voted on this in the past, and I don't know that another vote is necessary. And I'm a little offended that somehow, you know, you're manipulating this to make it look like we're trying to ignore certain things and trying to set, you know, a bar for experts when there's clearly experts that disagree on this topic. So there's disagreement. There's not unity and agreement in this topic at all. So I feel like you're manipulating the question to make us look bad on one hand. So I don't think it's an honest thing that you're doing. You know, I do give recommendations to my patients, but do they follow them? Many times, no. You know, in fact, a lot of times they don't, and that's their choice. So I think here's, like I said earlier tonight, we're a school. We're open. If you want to come to school, come to school. If you don't want to come to school, stay home. That's fine. If you have an illness or a health issue or a condition that puts you at risk and you shouldn't be at work, then you shouldn't be at work. You know, everybody else makes these choices. So you talked about we're still America. That's the point of being an American, that we can make a choice individually at what is acceptable level of risk for us. So I just think the bottom line is we're a school. We're here to educate. Our doors are open. If you want to come, come. If you don't, fine.
And what about the teachers that don't want to come?
Well, they have that option. They can apply for some sort of waiver from their doctor. They get a note from their doctor if they can't make it. What about the other people who are employed in this county that their employers are asking them to come to work? Do they get a choice to stay home? No, they probably lose their job if they said, you know, I'm just not going to come to work unless I have a valid reason. So
I'm just asking, I'm sorry.
I think it's a false question. That's what I'm concerned. I feel like you're painting this motion to manipulate us into making a decision, and it's just trying to make us look bad. That's it.
I apologize, that's not my intent. I think that the CUPHD made recommendations last week that I got an email that said are new recommendations that took some people by surprise. And I think based on those new recommendations, the role of this board is to decide whether or not we're going to follow those recommendations. And the only way that we can do that is through a vote. And I think it's important that we make that motion and take that vote. So I've made a motion. If it doesn't want to be seconded, then we don't have to go through with this. But I believe the proper procedure for this board to make decisions is to go through motions. And based on the fact that I got an email that said circumstances have changed and the IDPH and the CUPHD have given different guidelines, that we need to decide whether or not we're following those.
This is not coming from IDPH.
It's not IDPH. And in fact, 2 other health departments in adjoining counties said, wait a minute, we think schools are the safest place for our kids to be. And those are counties with higher positivity rates than we have in Champaign. So there's a lot of conflict on this.
Dr. Hall, can you confirm what Jeremy just said actually? Is it currently our policy that any in-person student is able to switch to fully remote at this time?
We have done our best to accommodate every single request. And at the junior high and high school, it's very easy. I mean, it's seamless. We handle those requests on an individual basis, K-5. And to be honest, I don't know of any that we've turned down. We talk with parents individually on a case-by-case basis just to find out what's going on. It creates a little bit different situation with K-5 because we have teachers who are dedicated solely to remote teaching. And we have asked parents to only ask for a switch if there's a medical issue that warrants that. And so our principals work through that. I don't know, I have no idea how many switches have taken place, but it starts with a conversation, and we work through those. I think that we've been incredibly accommodating. Our teachers have been amazing with that because at the K-5 level, it means you change teachers.
Was there a second on the motion?
I would like to second it. Thank you.
I've been pretty clear for several months now that we're not going to vote on stuff that's not on the agenda as an action item. In this case, I feel like I'm going to continue to be bullied until I do. So we'll take a vote. Is there any further discussion before we vote?
I'm sorry, I had another question for Nita. Nita, as our lead medical professional hired by the district, do you think we should listen to CUPHD's recommendations?
I always think that we should listen to what's given. Here's what I also think. I think that we have to also listen to the whole context of the statement. I too was on the Zoom. I saw that you all were there. I was not involved in the conversation with the superintendents. However, I did have a conversation, and CUPHD again reiterated to me as well
is this statement verbatim that I was told is, well, we hope that some schools will follow the request. That's what was said, is that they hope that some schools will do this. And the reason for this is because they are overwhelmed. Right now, public health is overwhelmed. They can't get all their phone calls made. They can't do what they need to do. They've got ads out for contact tracers and all that. The difference, and that was the same conversation when I was also told, thank you so much for what you were doing. The schools are doing a great job, and we are able to be where we are as big as our district is. The reason that we haven't had outbreaks in our buildings and in our district is because of what we're doing internally and because of the mitigation risks, the mitigation measures that we are taking in the buildings as far as our distancing, our hybrid, and everything that we're doing right now is keeping us moving forward. So I guess, you know, none of us know what's gonna come in a week or 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. We don't know what that's gonna look like. There may come a time that that's not an option. I'm not sure that right now for our district that we're at that space. You know, again, we don't know what'll happen in 2 or 3 weeks. It may get to a point where it's like, oh my gosh, this is blown up to the point that we can't contain it, and that may be a different conversation. I feel like even though the numbers are rising, I feel like we're still in really good shape in our district. So
we have a lot of people in this county that are getting ready to leave and go out of town for 2 months too. Students that will not be here to be tested, they'll be gone.
So I appreciate CEP, PhD has to work with the entire county, but isn't it also true that we're actually one of the best school for records on this in the county?
right, they took my standards to
Right.
give
So
to
in a
others.
sense,
Yeah. So
we're not the average. We're not above the average. In fact, we're an anomaly.
right, we
Okay.
seem to be. We
Yep.
seem to be.
Okay, so I'm
I
clear
would-
on what we're voting on. We've already announced publicly that we're gonna be in school through the end of this week. Is the motion that we call off school effective and go remote effective in the morning? Or are we finishing this week in this motion, or what are we doing?
My motion says that we go immediately. My guess is that the administrators have a better understanding of what immediate means.
Okay.
So we're just.
What is our, I mean, I heard the response to Ken's question about students being able to go remote.
Right.
My question is there any consideration that we might discuss that we would allow, say, a one-time change in the very near future, at the end of the week, at whenever, after Thanksgiving, something, for parents who feel as though the recommendation from the public health department changes their perspective on whether or not they want their students in school, so that we might accommodate them, so that.
So we're only gonna allow one more change?
So Colleen, I think it's a fair question, and what the principals have done is if parents really aren't sure, but they're not 100% sure they want to send their kids back, is we're treating them as if they're quarantined. So they're getting the lessons and materials K-5 from their current teacher, and they're still getting graded, they're still getting the instruction, but we're just treating it more as a quarantine for K-5 for the next couple of weeks until the parents feel like they have a better handle and are better able to make the decision.
So I'm really concerned that if we have a lot of people in that position, that puts a really undue burden on the teachers. If your teacher who has 28 kids in their class now has 12 kids who are going to stay home, so now they're
six kids K-5 when I met with the principals today.
So that's one per grade level on an average.
How do we know that?
Because I talked to for parents that contacted the principals and said, we're not sure. We had 6 kids.
I mean, I guess that, are you saying that there are 6 kids who the parents have already contacted the principal?
Yes.
Yes, following the guidelines that came out.
Friday. Thursday.
What they're emailing saying that
So-
we're gonna choose, that we're deciding we want to follow.
So when the guidelines came out and we released and said, we're staying in school, there were 6 parents that contacted us about moving the kids.
6 students.
6 kids that we were contacted about moving.
Right.
And you anticipate that would be the complete number?
I'm guessing maybe there would be a couple more. I do not anticipate there being 12 kids per class.
Okay. I think, I mean, I feel as though there might be a lot of parents who are going to say, who haven't called yet, but between Thanksgiving and Christmas will want to keep their kids home. And so I'm really concerned that that's going to be a big burden on the teachers and a struggle for the students.
Yeah. If they travel, I really do hope they keep their kids home.
Yes. Me too.
Another issue here. Sorry, Colleen, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ken. It's fine.
Another issue here is our ability to staff our buildings. My understanding is we've had principals subbing in the classrooms on a semi-regular basis lately. At what point are we, how many subs are we going to not be able to fill before we call it and say, okay, we've got to shut this building down? That question's for Dr. Hall. What are you thinking is the plan for that?
We definitely had days where we've had principals in classrooms. There's no doubt. I don't have the exact data on that. I mean, the shortage of subs actually was very real prior to the pandemic. And so we've expected that it's would get worse with this, but we've not approached a level where I've thought we needed to shut down a building. We have not been close. So I don't have a number. I think that we continue to move ahead and handle these things as they come up. And I understand fully, deeply, that everybody wants a plan. I say everybody, I'm putting myself in that. I want a plan. I want the lack of certainty and to go away. But this whole pandemic has been about needing to make decisions in the moment with the information that you have at the time. And so, harkening back to the statements made earlier this evening by the MSCA co-president, when I supported the recommendation to go back for 4 full days a week starting January 2nd semester, that was based on information that we had at the time. And this has been an evolving and changing situation since March 13th. And 8 months later, it's no different, and it's not going to be any different going forward. And I wish that were different, but the email that I sent out to our staff and parents on Friday was based on the information that I have and had at the time. And so I'm diverting a little bit, Ken, from your question about subs, but that kind of falls into the same category, that we make decisions based on the information that we have at the time. And that has been how the relationship with CUPHD has been characterized throughout this entire school year, this year, as we've worked with them on an almost daily basis, Nita in particular, mostly Nita. And there has not been a time in those conversations where the health department has suggested that we close down a building or that our district go remote. We haven't even been close. So therein does lie some of the surprise that occurred from pretty much most of the county superintendents on Thursday when this pronouncement was made without warning by CUPHD that we should suddenly go remote immediately. So you take that, you absorb it, listen to the press conference Thursday afternoon, did some research on Friday, and actually talked then on Friday with Julie Pride, and got more information there. So that's been how the last 72 hours have gone in terms of school days, and that's probably how it's going to be moving forward. So I wish I could say like this is the time when we close building because we don't have enough subs, but so far we've been able to cover it. We've been very, very flexible and accommodating with parents that want to switch their kids. And I can't say enough about our teachers understanding that need, and we trust and we appreciate that those requests coming from parents are based upon a real genuine need to switch, and we made some of those switches and changes today. So that's where I stand at this point with the current situation, and just have to take information as it comes and make the best decision that we can.
So with the information you have now, would that cause you to reassess your recommendation for what we do in January?
It might, yeah.
And so would
But
you see?
I also the analogy I would use right now is I don't want to call a snow day in January now.
And so do you think it might, do you think there's any appropriateness in the district acknowledging to the parents that that decision is not set, so that the parents don't have an expectation that it is 4 days a week and then it is changed again? I think that change is very difficult without, you know, if we go and then all of a sudden we say, oh, well, we said it was going to be 4 days, but now it's not, that would be more difficult. That we
yeah,
would.
but we're just suggesting going fully remote tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I respect what you're saying, Colleen, and again, I just go back to I would love to remove the change and uncertainty that we have lived for 8 months. But what stands right now is a plan to go 4 days a week, and I think as we move ahead, yes, that could need to be reassessed. I mean, I don't know what that's been true all along.
I'm gonna throw in here, I'm sorry.
No, I just was gonna say again that if we're worried about a massive change, then, you know, going remote tomorrow is significant for all involved, our employees, our families, and most importantly, our students.
I think the community
And
needs
to remind everyone, sorry, go ahead, Max.
I think the community needs to know two things. They need to know where the ship is headed, hopefully under the best case scenario, and what the plan is. And then they need to know exactly what Dr. Hall said in her email last week, that you know what, we're evaluating everything every day, and things could change. I think if they've been paying attention to what's been sent out, they should get that. If they don't understand that, I hope they're listening tonight and understand that we've got a plan for second semester. We hope that's the plan that we're gonna implement, but this is a constantly changing situation. You know, there was a school in our area that had an outbreak in one department, and it shut them down, but the department was transportation. You can't run, you know, you can't make 3,500 kids all walk to school that are spread out all over the county. And they didn't plan that. That wasn't their plan. But they had to make a call, and they had to shut down for a while.
I think it would help, at least me, I don't know if it'd help anyone else on the board, if we would have a better understanding of the data that we have. I understand the confidentiality nature that you're not going to say the names of the people that have COVID or are quarantining. But I think if we had a better understanding of the scope of what was going on as board members, to know how many people are positive, in what building they are they staff or students, those kind of things would help us to have a better understanding of the situation. Because I just keep hearing the data show this and the data show that, but I don't actually have any data.
We sent a letter out, Dr. Hall sent a letter out last week that had that very detailed in it to all the families in the district. We went through and we broke it all down by building, how many staff, how many students were quarantined, and how many were positive as of that moment. And of course, it's changed since then. It changes.
It was on Friday the 13th.
Are you talking cumulative, Colleen, over the semester, or just what?
I mean, I guess what it is that I don't have a sense of how the COVID disease or illness or whatever is progressing through our district. I feel as though the information is disjointed, and so I don't have a big view of it. I feel as though it comes in little pieces in different ways. I feel different people hear different things. That makes people talk about everything. And I just feel as though I would benefit from a more complete set of data.
I guess I'm wondering what more data you want, Colleen. The dashboard shows every single day how many positives and how many exposures we have. The end line is the total for our whole school year. Starts August 19th. At the very top of the dashboard, at the top of that graph, it says every single day what our current numbers are. So it says, currently, this is our enrollment, this is our current number of people that are exposed, this is our current number of people that are positive. And that changes every single day, and then that's the data. I mean, it's updated as I make calls, as I get calls, that's what's on the data. So if I were to parse out every single column that doesn't have a name in it and give it to you, that's exactly what you would see. You would see exactly what's on the dashboard. You'd see what every single day looks like as far as exposures, as far as positivities. I don't know how else to, I don't know what other data I can give you other than we did do the cumulative last Friday, as Lori said the date that we went through, and because the numbers were rising, we did give a total of what was happening in each building on that day at that time.
So as a board member, I used to get an email that said, today we have a student that tested positive from MPE. Today we have a staff member at Lincoln Trail testing positive. Today, I just look at the dashboard, there's 4 positive cases. I have no idea if they're students, if they're teachers, what building they're at, how many quarantines resulted from that.
So if the issue is that you're not getting an email from me, then just let me know that, because that's what I'm interpreting right now. But what's been happening lately, because also our principals were, and in some cases still do, but would send out a letter to parents and then email the staff every time there was a positive case. But what's been happening lately is that our positive cases have often, the majority of them lately, and I don't want to put a timestamp on that because I'm not sure, but have been kids who've already been home on quarantine because family members are positive. Right. And so it doesn't, when a kid's already been out of school, on our end, it doesn't seem to make much sense to just send out another letter, which, it's not to withhold any information, it's just to say the kid's already been on quarantine and has not been in school.
When we do have a case that is in school that results in a lot of exposures or quarantines, then I do send that information to Dr. Hall so she can send it on to you guys. But as she said, recently, many of our cases have been people who are already in quarantine and were in school.
I guess I'm saying that
I was just gonna say, last week, I totally could have missed getting an email out to the board about it, so if I dropped that ball, I apologize.
I guess I'm saying I would appreciate getting the emails. I would appreciate hearing about cases. Even, I mean, I understand what you're saying about sending letters out to all the parents. I'm asking as board members if you can let us know when there are cases, where they are. You could even say this kid's already been quarantined or whatever. It's at this school, but it's really hard to feel as though the dashboard isn't a reflection of what you hear other places in the community and doesn't match up. And just the idea that in the past 48 hours, we've gotten emails from 2 staff members who say they got COVID at school.
They didn't. Did you hear that? We've had one since the beginning of the school year. I mean, I know that some of those things are coming through, but I will tell you that I am tracking that. And I can tell you that the vast majority, and I have said over and over to people, what we're seeing right now is not the result of in school. What we're seeing right now are from parents, from Halloween, from parties outside of school, people are having cookouts. So what we're seeing right now is everything external, not here. What happened back in September is off the table at this point. And yes, we had one contained issue at that time. That has not been the case since then.
I just try to
Then why do we?
board member that I can for this community, and I'm just staying focused here. That's all I can handle, and I can just tell you that's my strategy. I care what happens at Mahomet-Seymour, what happens with our teachers and our kids, and I can't look at the global picture because it's destructive. So just keep your eyes focused on this, what's going on here, and what we can do. And like, I feel like I flip the flip of that. I mean, I only get an email for a kid that I only have one kid at the high school, but I look at that dashboard every day. She puts it out for us every day. So I feel like it's inconsiderate to ask for one more tool of information, but I'm not in charge of getting it to you, so that's fine. When it's there, she puts the dashboard up. She told us on Friday in a newsletter. We're talking about it on a regular basis. I just feel like it's just one more thing, like I feel like we're trying to be so responsible and we're putting so much more on our plates than we need to. Could we please call the vote? We've been talking about this for a long time.
We got a motion, a second on the floor to go total remote effective immediately for an undefined amount of time. Is there any further discussion on that?
I just would like to quickly remind the board that this is what the teachers union asked for at the start of this meeting.
I feel like I would like to say, Lori, I am asking about what's happening right in front of us in Mahomet. That's what I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to reconcile the information I'm getting from a variety of places. And quite frankly, I'm asking the superintendent to be the one that provides the information to us so that we know that we're getting it from the source or I don't know what's the right word.
I appreciate that, Colleen, and again, I felt like I had been consistently doing that, and if the wheels came off the wagon on Thursday and Friday, I apologize for that. I think that the source for data is NITA, and I will convey that to the board. There's a ton of misinformation out there. I would just say that NITA is the source, and so is our dashboard.
I guess it's hard for me to.
Plenty of information. Okay.
It's hard for me to understand why we would have multiple staff members claiming they got COVID at school, and if they didn't, I mean, it seems like they would know more than anyone where they got that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the community, it's so widespread in the community. I'm not sure you know where you got it. Anyway.
Well, in that regard, we don't know if everyone's getting it at school, right? I mean, we can't say it is or is not spread at school because we don't actually have that data at all.
But if a kid hasn't been in school for 10 days and they turn positive because their parents are positive at home, then we know that that kid got it from their parents at home.
And we
That's
have
pretty
not
easy.
had teachers in school since September, again, early at the beginning of the school year. We had one circumstance. We have not had any since then. We have had no staff members in-house turn positive because of a student in-house since early September.
And I would say if there's a teacher out there that feels Nita's wrong about that, they need to address that with Nita so she knows and can correct it. Because I've known her for long enough that if she is in error about that, she will want that to be corrected.
Right.
I just want to say that sorry.
Sorry, Megan. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm trying to understand the situation. That's all. To make a decision, I need to understand.
And part of what the CUPHD's plea was is that we have widespread community spread. And that impacts more than just Mahomet. We don't have a hospital in Mahomet. We don't have just doctors that serve just Mahomet. We have a healthcare system that we have been told is on the verge of being overtaxed. And so I believe it is our responsibility to do what we can, not just for Mahomet, but for our community at large. It's my understanding that Carl is very close to having no more beds at all. We are in the middle of a surge in cases that we know is very typically 7 to 10 days, followed by a surge in admissions. And that surge only started about 3 days ago. So, which is why CUPHD did what they did on Thursday and Friday. So we can assume that in the next 5 days or so, that system, which is already very overtaxed, is going to be even more taxed. So I would be remiss if I didn't say, I believe that part of this decision has got to be outside of what is just going on inside of our buildings, because the decisions that we make affect the community spread that tax the healthcare system and the healthcare workers. Carl, I believe, is out of beds, and I understand that they went from 1 COVID team and they currently have 4 COVID teams. And I just think we have to understand that at some point that system will topple, which is why the plea came from the health department to say the whole system is requesting that everyone do everything possible to ensure that we can keep this system afloat.
If you wanted to, who's in the hospital, Megan? Are they kids that are in the hospital from schools? Are they older people? I mean, if the hospital's full of who? I mean,
they're full of COVID patients. I mean, I don't work in the hospital and you couldn't get that data anyway because of HIPAA. I'm just suggesting that I know that we went from 1 COVID team to 4 COVID teams, and that Carl and people that I know at Carl who are healthcare providers are indicating that that system is in real trouble. And I think that is the plea that we heard from the CUPHD, and the reason that they asked us to take the action that they asked us to take is because we are not in a bubble, and that the decisions that we make have a wider spread. And so part of our decision should be, what can we do that also helps the rest of the system at large? I understand that you're tired of talking about it. I just needed to make that point.
For the record, can we let Carl speak for Carl and quit?
Right.
Because that sounds.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Well, you're not the spokesperson for Carl. I haven't heard them say that. Yes, they're busy, but they haven't come out and said that they're overtaxed and there's no more beds. That's not true.
Well, I'm hearing from people in other departments that is what's being discussed. So I guess we'll have to agree to disagree.
and that's how we all been. I've heard people that want to go to school too. It's the
And
same.
listen, how many of our cases are contributing to that? We're not getting a lot of cases in our schools. How are we overtaxing the hospital system?
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. There's been a second. There's been lots of discussion. Are we ready to vote on this?
Yes, vote. My gosh.
Don? All right, so again, this is a vote on immediately going to remote learning.
Keith,
Yes.
Larson,
No.
Hennessy,
Yes.
Hendricks,
No.
Schultz,
Yes.
Giles,
No.
McComb.
No. Okay, is there anything else under COVID update? This time, a closed session is necessary for one, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives or deliberations concerning salary schedule for one or more classes of employees. Two, litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of a particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when a public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting. Three, the setting of a price for a sale or lease of property owned by the public body. Four, the discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed in the Open Meetings Act, whether for purposes of approval by the board, or by the body of minutes, or semi-annual review of the minutes as mandated in section 2:06. Is there a motion to go into closed session for those reasons?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, Larson.
Roll call vote, please.
Giles,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes. I vote yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Hennessy,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes, we'll recess long enough for folks to take a comfort break and to switch over to the secure link for the closed session. Public, we anticipate no action at the end of closed session. Thanks for hanging with us tonight. Thank you.